when two students from the Magic Academy challenged each other to a duel. No one expected such an outcome. Gray released a magical ether ball that was 100 times larger than his opponent's. If the professor hadn't intervened, the other student would have been completely destroyed. Looking at Gray, he couldn't understand how he had gained such power. Never before had any student possessed such magical strength, but the truth is, Gray is a regressor, and he wasn't always this strong. Here's how his story started. It's the final battle between humanity's greatest heroes and their demonic foe. But this time we're not following some glorified, overpowered hero. Instead, our protagonist is just another foot soldier, doing his job diligently, being the lowly runt he is. A sharp stray laser blasts straight through his chest. A hit so powerful that he doesn't even resist and just lets it pass through. And that wraps up his story in his final moments. He glances around at his fellow soldiers, dead and scattered across the battlefield. As for the so-called greatest heroes, well, they're locked in an intense clash against humanity's arch-nemesis, the Liquidator. Among the heroes are 4 brave warriors, each with unique traits and flashy powers. And then there are guys like our boy foot soldiers. Thrown in as sacrificial pawns, these guys are basically like NPCs standing in the corner with no dialogue. Their purpose, just die. He feels pathetic about himself, thinking how little he has contributed to this war. If only he'd been born with some kind of talent. But as powerful as those heroes might be, they don't stand a chance either. The Liquidator slices through them like cucumbers. Literally, a single blow is all it took to wipe them out. Turns out that monster was just toying with his prey the whole time. Humanity's fate has finally been sealed already. Or at least that's what Gray Lee thought. This is then he remembers that his heart has already been shredded into bits. And yet he's still not dead. Next thing he knows, he's standing in the middle of the ruins. In front of him is this omnipotent being who drops this bombshell with zero context. This mysterious entity reveals that Gray's body has already fully healed. But here's the kicker. He healed himself, using powers buried deep inside him all along. The entity continues to assert that Gray is actually far stronger than the Liquidator, the very same monster who slaughtered countless heroes, like mere pigs. However, he's unsure if Gray can even handle such immense power. So for the time being, the entity lends our boy a portion of his own power, just enough to utterly decimate the Liquidator. Back in the real world, Gray's sword is instantly engulfed in mysterious energy, a gift from the all-powerful being. Without wasting a second, he puts this energy to the ultimate test to see if it's the real deal or just hot air. Turns out, this power packs a serious punch, so much so that the Liquidator actually commends Gray for his impressive strength. But still not enough. As Gray goes in for another strike, BM, he's sliced in half, just like the rest. Blood gushes from his bisected body as the Liquidator, weirdly enough, praises him again. He's the first person to push the Liquidator so far, but he had to go all out. But the Liquidator is in for another shock. Gray isn't done yet. That blackish energy is fueling him. The lower half of his body, which was on a second ago, has now reformed, made entirely of dark energy. Bro is going full Black Clover mode with that massive sword of his. It's a sight to behold, to think that someone could actually make the Liquidator waver. The enemy sees no other option than to throw up a massive honeycomb shield to guard his sorry self. Gray doesn't even look human anymore. He crashes down with his colossal blade, and the impact sends literal shockwaves tearing through the air. The shield shatters into glittering pieces, and Mr. Cocky ends up eating dirt with the full brunt of the hit. Now, the bastard is seriously wondering if the thing he's fighting is even human. Hell, he's not sure if Gray is even alive. Meanwhile, our boy is asking himself the very same thing. Right now, it's all about the fight. And yeah, this freak is tough as nails. But our boy is determined to crunch the numbers and break this bastard down. He won't stop until this menace is erased. He throws another wild slash, and this creepy freak starts bleeding this creepy golden blood. In response, the freak busts out some next-level jutsu and sprouts celestial wings. Looks like he's messing with time itself. Day turns into night, with the moon glowing like a spotlight from the gods. It's pretty impressive, and Gray admits it, but not impressive enough to shake his confidence. He goes full throttle, launching a preemptive strike straight at the liquidator's neck. But surprisingly, the sword doesn't pierce. There's some weird shield around him again. Then he starts yapping. Nonsense that flies straight over my head. Apparently, within this plane of true dusk, nothing can hurt him, or at least, that's what this bastard claims. He tells Gray to look up at the sky, to see just how deep in shit he really is. Well, our boy looks up out of curiosity and sees a blinding, star-like thing glowing with insane intensity. Then boom, that thing crashes down like a damn meteor and obliterates Gray from existence. The liquidator stands victorious, staring down at the crater left behind. But thankfully, that mysterious entity from earlier shows up again, just in time to rewind everything and send our boy back into the past, with one sole mission, to save the world. By the way, that mystery man's name is Kronos, apparently. He and the liquidator have some kind of history, but no one is telling us what kind. So anyway, cut back to our boy, who opens his eyes in a peaceful green neighborhood right after his regression. It's quiet, calm, and honestly pretty damn photogenic. Turns out he's in his hometown, Renato Village. Not just his hometown, but the past version of it. He's almost 15. Years in the past. Looks like Kronos kept his word. Gray's been sent back in time for one final shot at saving the world. Suddenly, a stinging pain crawls through his hand. As he glances at his hand, he spots wounds and tight bandages encircling his wrist. A sudden realization hits him. This was exactly when he was practically Belder and his crew's personal punching bag. But with this fresh start, it'd be pretty pathetic if he still got bullied. Then again, he couldn't possibly fight those guys head on. Bro's totally out of their league. In hindsight, even beating the liquidator sounds like a pipe dream anyway. You gotta figure out how to handle these bullies, or he's doomed to relive the same suffering all over again. Seems like he can't catch a break. Or can he? He just so happens to stumble across the very same jerks he's been dreading the most. Of course, it's Belder and his infamous goons. Since they've been utterly bored lately, they've been actively hunting our guy, eager to continue their tradition of good old-fashioned bullying, like it's their new religion. They casually toss a spare sword at his feet, ordering him to pick it up. Our boy just stares at the sword, totally clueless. He still hasn't figured out what these goons are planning. After all, it's been 15 years, so his memories are a bit hazy. Belder, meanwhile, just assumes Gray is pretending to be clueless on purpose, so he's kind enough to remind him about their usual mock battles. Hearing that, Gray quickly tries to brush these pests off by pointing to his injured hand. He's grateful for the invite, but unfortunately, he can't join because his injury hasn't healed yet. But it looks like he can't shake these delinquents unless he picks up the sword and fights. They even assure him the swords are totally blunt, so there's barely any chance of getting hurt. Gray, however, can't shake the feeling that injury is still possible. No matter how blunt the blade, it's still a solid lump of iron. One wrong hit in the wrong spot could book you a one-way ticket to heaven. Well, he's got a point. One gentle tap on the balls, and you'll be doubled over on the ground in unbearable pain. But these guys don't seem to grasp the logic behind Gray's words at all. Belder takes his stance, ready to strike. He can't stand Gray saying no, so he charges. So at him like a raging bull, igniting the duel. Gray barely get a chance to grab his sword, but it's already too late. Belder is on him. Our boy finds it absolutely ridiculous that this dude calls this a mock battle, while charging like he's furious at his own mother. And that's when Gray remembers something a former military doctor told him. The reason his swordsmanship had stagnated was due to an old injury from his childhood. Thinking back on it now, could this be the injury that forever altered his life and condemned him to live like a runt? Belder brings his blade crashing down, but Gray blurs away, deftly dodging the strike. Seriously though, even Gray himself is shocked he actually managed to dodge it. Belder's face, meanwhile, tightens in annoyance at Gray's unexpected agility. He throws another strike, which our boy dodges yet again. Then a quick strike aimed at his feet is also easily avoided. The bastard is relentlessly trying to tag our boy. He's like a bloodthirsty predator on a mission, determined to absolutely take his opponent down. But Gray slips through, moving like a ninja on cocaine. At first, Gray thought Belder was just slow, but then a shocking realization hits him. It's not Belder who has gotten slow at all. It's he himself who has gotten faster. Bro is literally dodging every single strike like he owes rent. Even Belder's goons can't believe their eyes. It's like Gray has transformed into a completely different person. He might not possess the body he once had, but he still retains the vivid memories of every brutal battle he's ever fought. With all that experience etched into his mind, his body is practically on autopilot. He barely even has to try to dodge those strikes. Then, Gray grabs the sword to keep this so-called mock battle going, which isn't feeling very mock anymore. Belder, drowning in his own colossal ego, desperately tries to crush Gray under his blunt blade. But our guy has finally had enough. He swings his sword for the very first time. The sudden, powerful jerk from his swing leaves Belder's hand aching like absolute hell. That just goes to show how truly pathetic Belder is. If Gray is being brutally honest, he actually feels like the real loser here, duking it out with such a weakling. But he also believes that Belder doesn't deserve an ounce of pity. He's the piece of trash who bullied Gray, snatched away his future, and caused all that suffering. So with all due respect, Gray is going to make Belder taste his own medicine. On the next move, Gray effortlessly knocks the sword right out of Belder's hand, disarming him instantly. While Belder can only stew in humiliation, Gray realizes this dude is even worse than he thought. He takes the opportunity to throw a jab, mocking Belder's utter incompetence with a sword. One single blow sent Belder's sword flying. Then again, being unarmed isn't a huge problem after all. Belder was the one who insisted. These blunt blades were totally safe to use and fight. Gray is going absolutely nuts, swinging the blade so fast it literally cuts through Belder's skin, causing blood to gush out. As the gravity of the situation sinks in, Belder's knees lose all strength and buckle. Wait a minute, Gray thought he was using a blunt blade, so how come this bastard started bleeding? When he looks at his blade to confirm, he finds out it's indeed a blunt one. Though if it had been a sharp sword, this dude might actually be dead now. Now, let's not get distracted from the situation at hand. Gray swings the blade precisely, knocking out multiple teeth and leaving Belder's nose bleeding like crazy. Our guy is towering right over this bastard, giving him chills for life. It's always pretty amusing to see arrogant pieces of trash get rendered into sobbing messes. It seems like this much is enough to humble Belder for the rest of his life. Oh well, looks like I spoke too soon. This bastard still hasn't learned his lesson. He orders his goons to get our boy and whip his ass until he's a total mess. The goons hesitate to step forward for obvious reasons. They literally just saw their boss get beaten like a pathetic dog. So it makes no sense to succumb to the same fate, even though they have the power to avoid it. One of the guys suggests they attack in unison to overwhelm Gray. The trio quickly leaps into action, surrounding our boy from every direction. Gray, however, is as nonchalant as ever. If these guys desperately want their death wish granted, our guy is more than ready. Everyone leaps at him, intending to finish him right here. At first, Gray had an ounce of sympathy for these thugs and had decided to spare them. But it looks like they won't stop until they learn their lesson. So, he gives these gutter goblins exactly what they truly deserve. Not long after, their faces are swollen like a baboon's backside after an unforgiving face massage. Once again, Gray finds it ridiculous that these crying emojis in human form used to be his worst nightmare. He recalls this group is currently students of Sari's swordsmanship dojo. Belder admits they are students of that dojo, though they haven't been visiting lately. Apparently, these soggy biscuits believe they were already powerful enough. Well, that's pretty low standards for someone who's supposed to be strong enough. Not that Gray expects much from the dojo itself. He shows interest in joining the dojo, So he wants these goons to act as his referral. Belder refuses to fulfill the request. After all, he can't. Imagine the consequences once his master finds out he pathetically got his ass handed to him. Gray knows exactly how to deal with these guys. He merely swings his sword around to intimidate these suckers, hinting at the worst that could happen if they don't listen. Funnily enough, this little threat works wonders. Belder is not only humbled, but that beatdown gave him the speed of a cheetah. He literally speeds down the road to reach the dojo as soon as possible, even leaving his friends behind. A while later, they enter the town. As they walk, Belder expresses his curiosity. Why is Gray interested in joining a dojo? Turns out, this dojo has a recommendation slot for the academy. Our boy doesn't have to say more, since he's sure Belder is mature enough to understand what his main goal is. One of the guys wonders why Gray even feels. Why join an academy when he's already a force to be reckoned with? But little do these fools realize, our guy doesn't set the bar quite so low. He has his own definition of enough. He vividly remembers the day all of humanity's heroes were slaughtered like pigs in the blink of an eye. And that was supposed to be the world's strongest lineup. Forget the heroes. Even he couldn't scratch that monster. With all the mysterious power he had, only the heavens know how much power will be enough to truly defeat that foe. Though he wasn't completely hopeless back then. The moment he gained those badass dark powers, he felt like an omnipotent being capable of destroying anything. What held him back, though, was a glaring lack of swordsmanship skills. He had been relying on a few tricks he'd learned from the Sword Saint. If only he had spent more time training in swordsmanship, just like the Sword Saint did. He's pretty sure he could have turned the tide of battle single-handedly. This is likely why Kronos sent him here, to grind his skills to perfection, until he's worthy to wield that dark, mysterious power. Again, a while later, we meet the master those goons were talking about. The group is getting an earful for picking a fight with a random civilian. And what's worse, all they got after challenging that civilian was a humiliating defeat. This intimidating woman is swordsmanship dojo instructor Saria Belder. Belder tries to clarify they weren't actually trying to bully anyone. It was just a mere mock battle. The poor guy ends up taking a devastating blow for his lies. A hit hard enough that he'd be launched to the moon. With this one-way ticket, his goons are shivering in terror, wishing they could just survive this day. Nothing to be afraid of, guys. The stunt she just pulled was a little lesson she wanted to teach these fools. If they call beating up someone unarmed a mock battle, then what she did also counts as a mock battle. She points her sword right over Belder's ugly face and expels him from the dojo immediately. Not only him, but his goons are joining him too. Those pathetic goons finally grab their pathetic loser leader and pathetically shuffle out. She immediately twirls around, kneels on her feet, and apologizes to her new recruit on behalf of her former students who caused him so much trouble. Our guy brushes off the apology, getting straight to business. She's heard he wants a recommendation to the academy, to which our guy affirms it. Since Belder and his second-rate team caused him so much trouble, she's willing to write a letter of recommendation for him. However, before doing that, she wants him to prove his worth. Both contestants stand ready against each other, wooden swords in hand. Being the senior, she generously gives him the opportunity to strike first, and thus the exchange of blows begins. They move so fast that literally all they leave behind are blurring trails of silhouettes from their fearsome strikes. All the while, Saria does her job, which is to assess our boy's capabilities. She can tell his swordsmanship is quite practical for his age. It's as if he's been through countless battles before. Now it makes sense why those bozos got there but's handed to them by a single person. His style is mostly self-taught, but every so often, his swordplay looks similar to what's taught at the academy. This likely means someone probably taught him, though his technique is still rough. One thing's for sure, though, he's got a lot of raw talent, begging to be tapped and harnessed to its fullest. She's basically found a diamond in the rough. Now that she's assessed him, she decides to end the duel with the last blow she's about to deliver. Our guy braces himself and effortlessly parries her attack. This macabre dance once again begins. Bro is literally parrying each of her attacks, like he's allergic to damage. This prompts the woman to grow anxious. His lack of hesitation is completely throwing her off. It's like no attack she tries can falter his stance. Heck, she even starts to feel annoyed at herself, to think she has to give her all in a mock battle that was only meant to gauge this young gun's capabilities. She gets overwhelmed to the point she starts feeling, for a moment, a chill runs down her spine. It looks like some nightmarish demonic entity poised to unleash something truly catastrophic. After miraculously surviving our guy's last swing, she deflects it with shocking ease. She realizes it was nothing but a wild, desperate swing. Following that frantic, reckless swing, Gray's fatigue sets in, his energy rapidly dwindling. The woman sees his momentary faltering and mistakes it for weakness in his guard, so she lunges like a predatory cat, only to find herself instantly checkmated. The tables have abruptly turned on her. The broken wooden sword clatters to the ground, while Gray finds himself momentarily stunned. He inadvertently tapped into the dark power he wielded during his battle against the Liquidator. The very fact he used a trace of that power now means he still has access to his formidable abilities, even after regressing to the past. But then disaster strikes. An agonizing backlash engulfs his body, crippling him with intense pain, so severe that he collapses to his knees. He's too weak to even stand upright, while Saria is visibly alarmed by his condition and desperately wants to help. Even after using just a fraction of his power, Gray realizes that his current body is too weak to fully unleash his abilities. Still, he musters the sheer determination to stand on his feet again, despite his body quivering uncontrollably. After reassuring her he's okay, Gray finds himself lost in thought, realizing he can barely stand, which truly emphasizes just how efficient he's going to have to be with his abilities. He's also pondering revealing the truth about his power to the experienced sword master standing before him. Saria just stares at him, utterly lost and confused. Meanwhile, our boy calmly assesses the situation with a clear head and concludes that he absolutely shouldn't tell anyone what happened. After all, who would ever believe his ridiculous story? And it's not like he can just control his dark powers at will to demonstrate his claims. Keeping that in mind, he quickly concocts an innocent excuse, claiming he simply overexerted himself. But to the swordmaster, she doesn't believe him for a single damn second. He's thinking how utterly ridiculous that excuse sounds coming from him. There's no way he could have sliced through her wooden sword when they were fighting with dull weapons in the first place. She's incredibly clever, quickly understanding that Gray is hiding something from her. Virgil's daughter points what's left of her sword directly at our boy, causing Gray to ask if something's wrong. From the way he handles his reaction, it's clear she understands. He doesn't want to talk about it right now. But instead of challenging him, she respects his decision. She then asks about his initial interest in getting a recommendation to the academy. Our boy confirms this, sharing that he heard she could help him. Saria doesn't deny it either. She emphasizes that with her authority alone, she can get him a recommendation to the Royal Academy of Swordsmanship, the best educational institution their kingdom has to offer. Yet, surprisingly, she shows no interest in recommending him to that institution, adding that Gray is completely unfit for the academy. Her cold words stab him sharper than any blade. Gray starts beating himself up inside, doubting his abilities and admitting he's too weak. His final attack was the only remarkable thing he'd done in that battle. But wait, Saria hasn't finished talking. She continues her thoughts, arguing that instead of the Royal Academy, the kid should head to the World Union Academy instead. What plot twist that is. The revelation hits him harder than Truckcoin, hitting his Ice Sky victims. Though the Royal Academy is their country's finest, the World Union Academy is the best in the entire world. This institution is deemed the pinnacle of sword mastery. Gray is at a loss for words because this same academy is responsible for producing the strongest battle squad, including the likes of the sword Saint Amy. He immediately confronts Saria, questioning if he's even qualified to attend a prestigious institution like that. Funny enough, the girl destroys his expectations, pointing out that, as he is right now, there's no way in hell that he's getting through that door. The Swordmaster knows that even Gray is wary of his own shortcomings, especially when it comes to his currently pathetic physical state right now. When it comes to the Royal Academy, the kid might pull off a miracle, thanks to his sword skills alone. But that's just not the case for the World Union Academy. So yeah, dude's screwed if he doesn't train his ass off. Even Saria is astonished. The kid has miraculous talent in his swordplay, and yet he's got a stickman of a body. Doubt is starting to creep in, genuinely making Gray worry about the monstrous opponents he'll have to face at the World Union Academy. It's not exactly a walk in the park, and with his current body, that's completely out of the question. Seeing his sorrowful state, Saria points out how he's quick to give up, even though there are 9 whole months until the Academy's entrance exam. Again, underconfident in his abilities, Gray thinks even that time won't be enough for him. Despite her efforts to encourage him, even Saria agrees that it's too little time. But even then, she offers him a chance. The Swordmaster wants him to trust her for the 9 months to come, because during this time, she's going to make him suffer through hell and back. Yeah, something tells me she's going to hire David Goggins and make this guy run 3 ultramarathons and do 6,000 pull-ups. Anyway, Gray admits that though he doesn't want to suffer, he doesn't have any other choice. Declaring himself ready, he hopes that the sword master will take good care of him. Saria takes a liking to his newfound determination. At first, you probably think it's a good sign that they're starting off on a positive note. But the atmosphere immediately switches to total fear as Virgil's daughter officially announces the beginning of his hellish training. Gray's agonizing trials began. He trained like Goku and honestly ate like him too. She really is putting him through a bulking phase. He also had to choke down some truly questionable food, but his teacher was absolutely relentless, pushing him through intense, endless sword duels. They continued the same, day in and day out, all with the sole goal of honing his techniques. And just like that, 8 grueling months flew by. Big congrats to Gray, who truly earned his shredded physique after enduring such rigorous training. Even Saria can't help but admire his new physique. Now that they've reached this point, she's got nothing left in her arsenal to teach him. He's officially ready to venture out into the real world. But her overly casual attitude completely baffles Gray, because there's still a whole month left until the entrance exam. Saria, Virgil's daughter, reminds him that he'll spend quite a bit of time traveling to reach the entrance exam's location. That's why he has to depart early. As a final token of gratitude, Saria hands him a generous bag of money, ensuring him a smooth and comfortable trip, covering all his expenses for the month. Now, that's a real teacher, but our boy, he still doesn't quite feel comfortable with the idea of leaving so soon. Her insistent approach disheartens him, because he believes his teacher is pushing him away, as if he's a burden. Smiling at his answer, she thinks he's overcomplicating the situation. Suddenly, Gray mentions a rumor of an ogre's nest nearby, immediately grabbing Saria's attention. He also points out that the village is completely unsafe due to the severe lack of security guards. Saria, the Swordmaster, confirms the nest's existence, as it was only discovered recently. At the same time, she smiles at him, believing that nothing truly bad will happen. If the absolute worst happens, they'll just have to rely on the royal capital for help. Though Gray is deeply worried, she believes his only focus should be taking his exam, without any other wandering thoughts in his mind. But he's convinced, like hell, that his teacher is lying to him, trying to soothe him so he doesn't worry. The royal capital is never going to send aid to a tiny village, and when the village is raided and inevitably destroyed by the ogres, it will inevitably result in Saria's brutal death, exactly as it happened in his original life. He learns she died, having faced the battle all by herself. Regardless, he keeps this information from her, simply accepting the grim situation. After thanking his teacher for all her help, Gray plans to leave right away, earning Soria's smile. Both she and her 2 personalities are rooting for him to succeed. A few days later, we see her traversing a perilous path as she makes her way to the nest. Here, skeletal human remains are horrifically hung from the trees as a dire warning. Soria is attempting to track down the nest, using the intel she received from the scout. Spotting a trail of blood ahead, she knows danger lurks ahead. But before she can make a move, the sword master is startled by the familiar voice of her disciple. Perched on a tree branch, he questions where his beloved master is headed so late at night. Surprised by his sudden entrance, she asks what he's doing here when he should be focusing on the academy. Sticking his landing, he touches down. He taunts her for questioning him, when he should be doing it to her instead. She lied to him, claiming she'd ignore the nest predicament and let the royal capital handle it. Making an excuse, Soria explains that the royal capital refused to come due to their own personal matters, which is why she took on the job herself. She's confident in her swordsmanship, believing that whatever lurks in that nest, she can defeat it, especially after receiving the scout's report. Soria reveals her main opponent will be an elite ogre and a horde of henchman monsters, numbering roughly 50 creatures apart from a boss. She knows fighting off these monsters will be tough because of their numbers, but it's not stopping her from going. By the way, even Gray admits that an elite ogre isn't that strong, at least not enough to defeat a woman of her caliber. However, the tricky thing about ogres is that their unique advantage comes from their brains and overwhelming numbers. With so many in that nest, Soria is definitely going to die if they manage to surround and overwhelm her beyond her own individual strength. Our boy is absolutely certain of one thing. Thanks to his past life's knowledge, letting Saria tackle this mission alone is a death sentence, and in the end, the village itself will fall, leaving no protector remaining. That's the bleak future he's already experienced before. With that devastating memory in mind, our young disciple asks to team up with her. But his master isn't so easily convinced, stating she's perfectly capable on her own. Instead of wasting his time arguing, she won't be enough. Gray, thinking quickly, tells her he wants to gain real combat experience. He even tries to guilt-trip her, asking if she fears he'll become a burden on her path. Though he's clever, his master points out the sheer ridiculousness of that claim. Their skill difference is almost non-existent now, to the point that she herself struggles against him in their mock battles. Even with that fact in mind, Saria reminds her disciple that a real battle is vastly different, especially when you face a monstrous nest like this one. This task involves immense danger, which is precisely why she doesn't want Gray risking his life. At least not until he gains more combat experience. Her disciple is devastated by her conviction. After all, Saria wasn't budging from her stance. So he goes for one last desperate resort, an idea he wants to share with his master. At first, she's utterly surprised, until Gray straight up challenges her to a fight, promising to put her to sleep, and then go on by himself to face the ogre. The tension mounts as the disciple has just challenged his own master to a real battle. His sword pointed at her, Gray awaits her response. Realizing her student is just as stubborn as she is, Saria finally admits defeat. She doesn't want him to go on alone, so she reverts to his original suggestion. They'll go together. All she cares about is that he returns in one piece. And yes, the one piece is real. Both of them band together and venture forth into the deep forest to confront the monsters. The night deepens, and finally, the master and disciple discover the hidden location of the nest. These intelligent monsters use their environment to their cunning advantage. They've crafted a nest that leaves no room for escape, just in case someone dare to venture all the way here to challenge them. Saria thinks these creatures must be overly confident, while Gray argues that it's actually more of a disadvantage for them, as they'll have to fight even more carefully. Observing from a safe distance, she's quite surprised. The boss is nowhere to be found among the group, which makes her wonder if it's hiding out in its tent. If that's the case, it's perfect for them, because this way, they'll be able to take down many henchmen before the elite ogre can confront them. They discuss their battle strategy. Saria instructs her student to target the monsters from one side, while she covers the other side. Executing the plan right away, both of them bolt into action, swords drawn and ready. The showdown begins before the monsters can even comprehend the situation. The majestic Saria is already on top of them, executing a clean headshot, making a gruesome football of the creature's head as it flops lifelessly to the ground. With the first monster down, the rest grumble and roar at each other in their guttural language. The entire group is enraged, going right into murder mode, preparing their weapons to slay the intruders. But it doesn't matter, as our boy is going beast mode with the way he's slaughtering the horde. This guy's a one-man army, cross-cutting multiple monsters all at once. The elegant Saria is no less impressive, showing off her impressive skills that she learned from Papa Virgil. The two of them are truly unstoppable. Gray and Saria perfectly cover each other's backs. Within mere minutes, every single monster in sight is reduced to a body count for them. By the way, she's actually quite impressed. Gray's unflinching determination shines through in a real battle. He's never felt more ready for what's to come. He even warns his master, telling her to stay on her guard as well. Here's the thing, though, something about the situation is giving him a really bad feeling. This fight has been way too easy for them. In fact, almost suspiciously easy. Because if this is truly the level Saria usually faces, then she could have defeated all of them by herself, even without a single shred of his help. And that's what's truly unsettling him. Because whatever is lurking inside that tent is going to be far more terrifying than anything they've faced so far. And speaking of which, the creature's menacing, glowing pair of eyes beam through the dark tent, glaring at him from afar. The second Gray's gaze meets the creature's eyes. He shudders in shock, completely forgetting his own strength. He cowers, frantically telling his master that they have to leave immediately. Even Saria doesn't understand what's gotten into him all of a sudden. Without explaining anything, he simply roars at her to run. There's so much raw fear in his voice that Saria doesn't question him for a second. She simply follows his instructions and bolts right after him. As they're running, you might be thinking they'll escape, but nope. Because their terrifying opponent literally leaps out from the skies with a massive vertical jump. Gray is absolutely terrified when a monster plants its feet into the ground. Confronting the now daring humans head-on, Saria's expression instantly changes to pure shock. She points out that the boss monster has personally come to them for a battle. But then Gray drops a bombshell no one, not even Saria, expected. This isn't the boss monster at all. Right as he's about to reveal the true location of the real boss, a monstrous voice roars at them from behind. This provocative roar unleashes yet another horde of creatures to chase after them. The unnerving noise is deafening for Saria, but for the ogres, it has converted them into battle-hungry maniacs. Saria shivers in pure fear, failing to comprehend what she's even sensing. There's a creature even more terrifying, far more menacing than an elite ogre, and it's been leading the entire group this whole time. Gray reveals their true opponent, an ogre general. He's the ultimate big boss of this monster nest. Just a quick reminder for you all. They're absolutely sandwiched right now. On one side, the elite ogre is completely blocking their escape, and going back isn't an option either, because a massive horde awaits them, along with the true mastermind of the nest. Saria is utterly shocked, fully knowing they can't possibly face a monster of this caliber, even at their level. Their only chance at victory is to take down the elite ogre blocking their path, just to escape. So she does exactly that, by charging at the beast and clashing her weapon against it, determined to win this battle. She exploits an opening, landing a sharp cut against the creature's tough body. Blood spurts out of the fresh cut, and while normally this should be a good sign, her worries only worsen when she notices the wound healing again. Meanwhile, our boy is clashing against dozens of monsters, all on his own. He's sharing his knowledge of the Ogre General's abilities. Apparently, its roar significantly boosts the strength and recovery speed of the monsters. Basically, they're up against an elite ogre on steroids. Defeating even a normal one is so difficult right now. that even Gray is having a hard time, just slashing one of the monsters. He tells Saria to cover his back. He instructs her to just delay the battle for a while longer, which makes her question what kind of miraculous strategies he's got planned. To that, our boy shares that in a situation like this, they've only got one objective in sight, and that is to kill the ugliest of them all, the bastard who's hiding behind his horde. The fight for survival begins, as Gray clashes his sword against one of the monsters. Reflecting his annoyance at getting surrounded and flanked, he deflects the slash and finds another raging monster aiming right at him. He's cutting past the enemies, focusing on making a clear path in front of him to get to his objective. But in his carelessness, he uses so much strength that it literally shatters his blade. This is genuinely troublesome because now he's without the one weapon he's most confident in. He dodges the enhanced ogre's downward slash and prioritizes drawing out his spare sword. Yeah, that's the smartest main character I've seen in a while. Carrying a second sword means being prepared anyway. Gray is worried that his blade won't hold up for long. Coming to his rescue, his master tosses her spare sword toward him, allowing him yet another chance at victory. With both spare swords in his hand, he has a better fighting chance. But still, even this won't be enough to kill every single one of these monsters. There's just too much friction in getting to the ogre general while also defeating its minions. Trusting his abilities, this man goes *T crazy, unleashing a super speed slash across his enemies. His forward momentum is broken when one of the ogres tries to attack him. Luckily, he dodges and then quickly blocks the attack. The fight is fatiguing him, but he still made significant progress, dealing with the monsters in front of him. The ogre general feels threatened and decides to unleash a second monstrous roar. To Gray's horror, the strengthened creatures have just received yet another boost in strength. This guy is not having a good time as he's struggling even more now, having to deal with them. Gray realizes that the ogre general is intelligent enough to see through his strategy. Now that it knows what the human is trying to do, the ogre general keeps on roaring to provoke his minions to fight, blocking one of the strikes. Gray pushes past the monsters to bolt right ahead. A horde of monsters is ready to welcome him. Instead of facing off every single one, he efficiently cuts through the ones that are directly in his way. But even that leaves him with scratches and injuries all over his body. The bloodbath is wearing him down as he struggles to race past their endless barrage of attacks. Letting his guard down, he gets tackled by one of the ogres and pinned into place. Things are looking grim for him as the ogres have him exactly where they want him. Luckily, their fury has made them lose all sense of cooperation. One ogre wildly slashes through its own kind, and Gray quickly realizes their strategy is likely to weaken his swords. While he's lost in thought, a massive ogre rears back a powerful fist, aiming to crush his head. It's a do-or-die situation, and he absolutely cannot afford to get hit. He uses his sword to mitigate the damage, but even then, our hero is launched into the ground with a heavy crash from the sheer impact force, finding himself at the brink of death. Yet, this man still struggles to get up in his broken state. That's the true definition of a badass. The previous attack destroyed his spare sword, leaving him with only one blade. He faces dozens of ogres, plus their terrifying boss. Once more, the situation is completely against him. In fact, it's almost impossible to escape this alive. Despite experiencing a regression, he fully understands his current predicament. Gray simply can't win. Not against so many bloodthirsty monsters, intent on wearing him down. So, he decides to switch his battle strategy, roaring at his master to run away while she still can. He offers himself as a decoy for her escape. Saria hears this and smiles, refusing to treat him like that. She's still facing off against the strong and elite ogre, but Gray doesn't understand her determination to fight. He assures her to run away, promising he'll catch up soon after. But Saria refuses his suggestion, horrifically, revealing that she has lost her ability to run. She suffered a major gash on her thigh, reducing Gray's hopes to ashes. Even that approach is out of the question now. There's no other path left, except marching forward to his certain death. Swinging his blade in fury, he thinks about the reason why he regressed. Despite bearing such a heavy purpose, all of it is about to come to a tragic end. Our boy's final sword, and then it shatters into countless pieces. Yet, he stubbornly remains in denial. Even after losing his weapon, Gray refuses to accept this as his end. If only he can tap into the power from the future, that terrifying ability, the one that matched the Liquidator and actually hurt him. If he can wield it, even for a single moment, then these monsters will be torn to shreds. He vividly recalls the sensation he felt and clutches his broken sword, entering a deep meditative state. And when he reopens his eyes, Gray is no longer the same weakling he once was. A single dark, burning slash eviscerates the ogres, turning them to ash with his burning black sword. Even Saria can't comprehend what's happening, but it seems our boy is still under control, as even after tapping into his dark powers, he gives her a relieved smile moments later. Gray carves through every single creature in his sight, including the ogre general. Even his master can't comprehend what just happened. She's too busy focusing on the elite ogre in front of her. But now that the ogre general is slain, the strengthening abilities seem to have worn off. Saria understands that now she can easily finish off the beast, as it no longer has any regenerative capabilities. Using a Walmart version of Judgment Cut End, she strikes the creature down, declaring that the elite ogre was nothing without its master. They won at last. Both of them had defied all the odds and won the fight, despite having miraculously cut through an entire horde of ogres. Gray still apologizes for breaking her sword. Saria tells him it's nothing compared to saving her life. Instead, she collects the sword and wants to question him about the technique he pulled at the end. But before she can finish her sentence, our boy flops to the ground, knocked fully unconscious from the after effects, leaving his master to shout his name in concern. The perspective cuts to Gray's inner mind. He questions his surroundings and spots nothing but a chained, floating door in front of him. He's confused until the door suddenly releases the same dark energy he uses through his unique ability. A sudden, shocking realization hits him. This is his very own power. He wonders what happened if he could just break open that door. After all, he could finally obtain the immense power and make it his own. Determined to try, he marches forward, but the moment he takes his very first step, a deathly sensation washes over his entire body, scaring the ever-loving soul right out of him. And that's after taking just one step. Gray is so utterly struck with fear, he scrambles back. He doesn't have all the answers regarding the true source of his power. But one thing has just been made terrifyingly clear. If he dares to provoke the full use of his powers in his current state, there's no doubt in hell he'll die. And that's not just a light claim, because the feeling is so horrific it drives him to tears. From the void, a chilling voice creeps into his mind, commending him for his wise decision. Before Gray can process it any further, he jolts awake, panicking in his bed. His master is right beside him, relieved that he's finally awake. Worried, he asks where he is. She explains that she rushed him to the village infirmary as fast as humanly possible. This dude was actually knocked out for 5 whole days, and I'm so glad the author didn't just say 3 days, like all the other stories out there. Anyway, she was genuinely afraid for his life, while Gray is coping with the fact he had to recover for nearly a week because of the sheer burden of the technique he used. Even Saria thinks he went above and beyond in that battle. It was the very definition of defying all odds. Still, she's concerned about the state of his body and asks if he's capable of moving at all. To test it out, our boy tries to lift his arm, but he can't do a damn thing. He can barely use it after expending so much energy. But with the way he is right now, there's no way he can hold a sword. With an injury like this, well, actually, there's no way he'd ever be able to rub one off either. So he's got to fix this fast. Then there's the massive bruise on his arm, remaining after the brutal battle. Saria grows deeply concerned about his condition, realizing he can barely move his body. Gray confirms he's utterly helpless at this moment. Even his master concedes that his arm won't return to normal anytime soon, revealing that literally every single bone in his arm has been shattered to pieces. This shocking revelation surprises our boy because in a strange way, he doesn't feel any pain. That's actually thanks to the potent magic potion treatment he received. Our boy's jaw practically hits the floor because these things are supposed to be really, really expensive, and she just used one on him. Saria explains there's nothing to worry about, as the village chief personally rewarded them with it. The kid can't believe his ears. He doesn't even know the village chief personally, and he's received a magic potion at his expense. Saria thinks he's being dense for failing to grasp his situation. So she puts in bold words, Gray is officially the savior and hero of the village. Before he can fully grapple with what she just said, the village chief barges in to greet the boy, thanking him for everything, to point out the sheer greatness of his feat. The village chief reminds the kid that an ogre general is so incredibly strong that it takes an entire town to fight against even one. That kind of creature threatened their entire village, and yet one boy was able to pummel his way through, carving a bloody path and slaying the monster, ensuring the village's safety. For that, the village chief is eternally grateful. It's thanks to the valiant efforts of the boy and his master that their lives are no longer threatened. Unable to accept all the credit, Gray argues that they're greatly exaggerating what he did. But the village chief thinks it's him who is undermining what he did. Thinking about it for a moment, Gray reflects on the astonishing outcome. He thinks that maybe the village chief's words are right. He remembers his previous life. In that life, this very place burned to the ground because of those horrifying ogres, rating it down to ashes. That's the sheer magnitude of his achievement. The village leader is absolutely thrilled to give him a lengthy explanation of what makes him so great. But for now, Gray's focused on his mission, passing the entrance exam for the World Union Academy. Speaking of which, Gray just remembered his true goal. He carelessly went to battle creatures in the monster nest just weeks before his exam, with all that wasted time. In between, he's only got 2 days left until the date of the exam. Oh, and by the way, just getting there takes 3 whole days on foot. His best option would be to use a horse to traverse the distance in time. But he's dead broke and doesn't have the cash to afford one. Making a sudden request, he begs the village chief to lend him a horse for the journey. The good news is that the leader was already expecting Gray to make such a request, which is why he'd already prepared the best horse for his travels. Saria smiles, revealing that their original plan was to carry him, even if he hadn't woken up today. Some people truly support you despite your troubles, just like Gray's friends here. And I hope we encounter more of them in our lives too. Gray exits the infirmary, only to find the entire village roaring his name and rooting for his exam. They want him to do his best, and they're not afraid to thank him for what he did. The villagers even support him with a bag of money. Everyone donated, bit by bit, so he can apply for the entrance exam and support himself at the academy. Gray is eternally grateful for the villagers, who showed him so much love with their support. He also jokingly states that it's going to be really embarrassing if he fails and comes back. But Saria is absurdly confident in her student, emphasizing that the applicants applying for the entrance exam aren't capable of beating an ogre general all on their own. But that's not his only concern. Gray is worried about his arm, as it's still messed up and there's no telling when it will heal. To that, his master argues that he should make use of his left arm in the meantime. Even though his left arm works perfectly fine, he's simply more accustomed to his right. However, his teacher thinks with his skill level, it won't matter. Gray voices his concerns, stating the entrance exam's difficulty might prove overwhelming for him, to the point one arm would hinder him. But even then, Saria knows that the academy's teachers and examiners possess incredibly sharp eyes, and once they see his talent, they'll select him. The boy then mounts his horse as his teacher, confidently declares he's going to pass. That's the only outcome, thanking her for everything she's done. He promises not to fail, recalling how his village was razed to the ground in his previous life. He's thrilled that these people got a second chance. Right alongside him, the world is already changing from this moment onward, and he's going to influence the future. With his newfound power, in the next scene, our boy finally reaches his destination. Staring ahead, he locks eyes with the sheer grandeur of the World Union Academy. Inside the arena, the examiner announces the distribution of the exam tickets. All candidates are to remain in the arena. From the looks of it, there's a massive number of applicants, but only a tiny number of 20 will reserve a spot in class. They bicker about the ever-changing number of seats each year because in some years, the Academy even accepted 50 people, while in rare cases, it only accepted one. So the rules for selection aren't absolute, apparently. Anyway, Professor Ariel takes the limelight and steps to the front. He addresses the examinees and explains that they'll have to collect the paper being presented. With a snap of her fingers, a vortex of yellow opens, releasing magical energy and automatically manifesting tickets into each examinee's hand. Our boy collects his ticket. His examinee number is 513 for the fencing course. And Professor Ariel adds that their ticket shares only the most critical details, but it's nothing to worry about as the process is the same each year. She also confirms the Academy truly doesn't care about your age or gender, your nationality or class. In other words, they quite literally don't give a flying damn about any of that. They don't even care enough to learn their names. Only candidates destined to pass will be asked for further information. For the rest of the examinees here, it simply doesn't matter. Professor Ariel even confirms it's fine to offer a fake name, once again proving the Academy simply doesn't care. Trouble, however, seeks out our boy once more. He arrived without his sword today, yet he's been placed directly into the fencing course. This makes him question the system's legitimacy entirely. Professor Ariel continues, hilariously stating that she assigned each person a course based on their looks. I know she's supposed to be perceptive or something, but it's just funny how 1 minute ago she was talking about discrimination, and then she goes on to say this. Ariel is fine with correcting course details if she got them wrong. Even the examinees think it's impossible to assign a course based on sight alone, especially with so many people present. They strongly suspect the Academy must have investigated them beforehand, so that's how they know. The possibility of mind-reading magic also comes up. Professor Ariel doesn't address any of their concerns. All she's noticing is how no one is complaining about their assigned course. So next, she decides to reveal everyone's exam schedule. The details are imprinted on their tickets at once. Gray is nervous because he's scheduled to have his exam on the very first day. This allows him no time at all for his army heal. Ariel reveals this exam will only be conducted once, and it would decide everything. If a candidate is late, immediate disqualification will be the only outcome. She also reminds them their schedules are strict and won't be manipulated or disputed upon request. It's bad news for Gray, who is struggling with his recovery. He's begging for his body to pull a miracle and heal him by tomorrow. The next day arrives, and what do you know? The poor guy's arm didn't even heal a bit. He's got no choice, but he's forced to take the exam in this state. Soon, Gray's number is called, and he reluctantly steps forward. He tries to calm himself down in an effort to remain optimistic about his predicament. Quickly assessing his left arm, he finds no immediate issues there. He can still move his right arm, but only if he exerts enough strength. So his current strategy is to keenly observe the examiner's every move, hoping to discover a winning strategy. He watches a match unfold between a candidate and an examiner. The candidate blindly rushes to attack, but by the end of his furious assault, the examiner is completely unfazed and casually stands, calmly awaiting their next move. The candidate drags his sword for yet another desperate slash. But even that strike is utterly helpless. It's instantly blocked. And not only that, the examiner expertly deflects his blade before sending him flying with a devastating final blow, with his body hitting the ground hard. The examiner coolly concludes the exam, telling him to exit the venue. Now, you guys might be thinking, That Gray's perhaps found a secret. But here's the kicker. This man literally gives up and resigns himself to getting his ass cooked. His number is called to step into the arena. Gray reflects on his slim chances, realizing that he simply can't beat an examiner who annihilated a candidate even bigger than him. Now, inside the arena, our boy is granted the freedom to make the first move. Even with that advantage, he fully understands that this battle will be entirely one-sided. Still, he's got to make some kind of impression. The fight begins with Gray rushing to strike. He recalls his master's advice, who always told him to utilize his entire body to deliver a potent, full-power slash, rather than relying solely on his arms. Putting her advice into motion, he believes the only way he can cope with the disadvantage of his right arm is to utilize his other muscles instead. And with that, he delivers the first swing, which the examiner effortlessly dodges. Despite his efforts, Gray finds himself struggling to fight in his usual style, after all, even though he's trying to compensate for his right arm. Yet that changes nothing. The fact that he's at a massive disadvantage here. The examiner retaliates, attempting to cut Gray down, but to Gray's absolute astonishment, the sword is moving agonizingly slow. It's as if he can read its entire trajectory without even breaking a sweat. And just like that, our boy successfully blocks the attack. He still feels the sheer weight of the examiner's force behind the attack, all at the same time. He shrewdly judges that the examiner's technique isn't nearly as refined as serious. So if he could just focus on the advanced techniques he learned from her, there's a real chance he might just be able to exploit an opportunity and carve out an opening. With that precise strategy in mind, Gray rushes in full force, aiming to overwhelm the instructor. Oh, and the instructor is actually being pushed back. Unbelievable. His own speed is proving to be his demise. Gray finds himself becoming increasingly confident, realizing he can easily take down this examiner. The words of his master flash through his mind once again. Their blades clash once more. But Gray overwhelms his opponent with a full deflect, ready to finish the battle, fueled by his new confidence. Gray continued his relentless, aggressive assault, while the instructor tried his hardest to wrestle back control of the battle's pace. Although our boy had clearly seen through the opponent's technique, neutralizing it with a handicap is still a tough task. He exploited the speed gap and snuck in a straight stab, only to get utterly curved. The difference in raw power was simply too immense. Breaking the instructor's sturdy form is easier said than done with two hands, let alone just one. With that said, though, Gray's aggression was making the instructor's movements rougher bit by bit. It'll be a bit risky, but he can definitely push his luck here. With a clear plan firmly in mind, Gray lets the instructor push him right to the edge of the stage, exposing a massive gap in defense. Just as he expected, the instructor took the bait and pounced for a finishing blow. The instructor fell for the oldest trick in the book. He made a wide-open swing, just as Gray anticipated. The young warrior swiftly adjusted his stance and let the swing come straight at him. Nothing is more likely to expose a critical opening. Instead of a reckless, greedy push, a big and predictable swing was precisely what he needed to leverage his speed advantage. In an instant, he reached the instructor's vulnerable flank. No matter how vast the power difference, you can't defend against a vicious blow from behind. Milliseconds away from thrusting his sword for the win, the referee stepped in, signaling the end of the fight. Gray held back, lowering his blade. The match was over, but it felt a little too short. With the time limit for the exam elapsed, the referee announced the fight's result as a draw. The young man gritted his teeth in frustration. He failed. After all the hard work he put in, he couldn't get it done. He held his trusty blade tightly for a moment before relaxing his grip. Gray walked away from the stage, accepting the result with grace. He did his best. If he can't even win against an instructor, injury or not, his lofty goals are farther than he expected. Looking at the bright side, his arm should be healed by next year, so he can be at 100% for a retake of the entrance exam. No matter the result, This was a valuable experience deserving of gratitude. A week has passed since Gray narrowly missed the win against that glasses guy. Today, the World Union Academy faculty gathered in meeting room 53 to discuss the entrance exam results. White-haired, Gramps initiated the meeting by letting his colleagues freely express their thoughts on this year's batch. Immediately, moans of complaints filled the room. For this year, they devised a method for every professor to observe the exams together. It was rather inefficient and tedious. Of course, there are some who like the format. They couldn't afford to overlook a promising talent, simply for the sake of the faculty's convenience. After all, Graham steered the discussion away from the exam system and back to the hopeful students. Starting with the swordsmanship course, he summoned magical recordings of every examinee to evaluate those who passed. One last time. Naturally, those who outrightly beat the examiner passed. Those who couldn't get the job done will be evaluated based on their qualities, their performance, and how they fared during those 15 intense minutes of clashing, excluding those who absolutely dominated their instructors in battle. They narrowed down the standout candidates to numbers 5, 2, 17, and 753, with everyone agreeing to draw the line with just those 3. If they admitted any more underdeveloped talents, those candidates simply wouldn't be able to keep up. No one opposed a clear line drawn. So the successful candidates for the swordsmanship course were seemingly confirmed and locked in, or at least that's what was supposed to happen. Until a playful voice brought up candidate number 513, Graylee. It came from none other than the enigmatic, red-haired Professor Ariel. Since she'd mentioned an unfamiliar number, the other professors quickly pulled up the footage. They had to admit that, given another second, the young man would have likely won. But he relied heavily on setting up traps, just to beat an examiner. The academy might prove too difficult for this individual. Those with trained eyes for swordsmanship could clearly see the solid technique, the glaring lack of power, and the obvious mismatch from start to finish. In conclusion, the professors of the swordsmanship course dismissed the idea of accepting candidate 513 to the academy. While they were busy mocking the candidate's flaws, Professor Ariel just looked at her coworkers like they were complete dumbass. Every single person in this room watched the footage, yet not a single one of them noticed what she did. If everyone's this blind, maybe the exam's format really is a complete waste of time. The day after the final deliberation, the examinees were called back to the town square. They were tasked to gather at 11 in the morning. Tensions were running incredibly high, and everyone hoped to get that coveted acceptance. The time has finally come. An academy representative loudly announced that 6 candidates had passed the swordsmanship course, and everyone held their slips tightly, praying to be one of the 6. The first ones called were candidates number 5 and 217. Instantly, their paper slips incinerated into ash. Next up were candidates number 4, 32, 6, 15, 7, 53, and 9, 25. That's it. Out of hundreds, only 6 were skilled enough to get accepted into the world's most prestigious training institute. Gray arrived today with a glimmer of hope, only to have it utterly crushed by the harsh reality that he might not be good enough. The successful candidates were instructed to cross the bridge and complete their enrollment procedure. By the end of the day, those who passed were naturally giddy and excited to embrace the life of an elite. Those who flopped looked down in disappointment, wallowing in their failure. With the swordsmanship course out of the way, the representative surprisingly announced that one examinee had been selected by the divine special admission. Of course, it's none other than candidate number 513. Gray, mother-freakingly, his paper slip burned a different shade than the ones that came before him. The bright blue flame inevitably attracted everyone's attention, just when he thought he would have to train and rehabilitate his injury for another year. Gray was given a pass. Other candidates around him mockingly laughed upon hearing the mention of the divine special admission. Gray had no idea what he had just gotten into. This was the first time he'd ever heard about this divine business. Almost everyone sees this as a bogus admission, just a way to get someone unworthy through a backdoor, a sign of the World Union Academy's decline. Hearing the vitriolic chatter around him, Gray did not like the sound of being called a backdoor student. He wondered how he was even selected when he didn't have any relevant connections. His master could not possibly have his kind of pull in the academy. While the failures were mocking, the one guy admitted through the divine eye. A bald, old hermit scolded them for disrespecting a long-standing tradition. The way the bald hermit sees it, this admission holds an honorable category, churning out countless heroes for over a century now. Naturally, failures also mocked the hermit for being hopelessly outdated. Sure, the divine I was once hailed as the birthplace of heroes back in the day, but not anymore. Yet, recent divine I candidates include Amy White, Bella Albright, Leek Muller, and Jacob Bloomfield. These four share one glaring commonality. Everyone sees them as complete and utter failures. But hold on, we've already heard those names. In the near future, Amy White will ascend to become the Sword Saint. Bella Albright will rise as the Great Sage. And Jacob Bloomfield will take up the mantle of the Divine Archer. These three will reach the apex of their craft, forming the main force against the Liquidator. And now, Graylee's name will be mentioned alongside these legends. Meanwhile, those who passed were welcomed and provided with uniforms to change into. The entrance ceremony was about to begin, and the rookies were told to assemble in the plaza in front of the main office. Gray tried on his new drip, and it was a perfect fit. His black blazer, inlaid with gold, emblazoned with the Academy's crest, was clean as hell. He went from feeling defeated to utterly dapper alongside his batchmates. However, when they reached the plaza, some of the rookies were utterly confused. There was absolutely nothing there. Their confusion quickly cleared when an academy staff member sprinted toward them, an apologetic expression on his face. He explained there had been a slight delay setting up the ceremony due to a minor mix-up. Thankfully, it wouldn't take long to fix. To do so, the rookies just needed to step back a little farther so the setup could be placed. The rookies cautiously followed the staff members' instructions, watching with skepticism. Mr. Staff knelt down and started tinkering with the ground. After a brief moment of preparation, he then touched the floor and activated a massive magic circle. In the blink of an eye, seemingly out of nowhere, hundreds of seats, arranged in a coliseum style, emerged for the magic circle. The rookies were absolutely flabbergasted. They'd never witnessed magic on such a massive scale before. In mere seconds, the plaza transformed into a full-fledged arena, complete with grandstand seating and a stage. Mr. Staff apologized for the slight delay once more and instructed the new recruits to sit wherever they pleased. Still reeling from the absurd magical display, they promptly followed suit. Some of the more astute rookies recognized the use of teleportation magic to quite literally materialize an entire arena. Gray quietly took a seat in the middle row, figuring this was the Academy's grand way of conducting a grandiose entrance ceremony right by the school building. They're essentially flexing the immense power of the World Union Academy. Once everyone was seated, other rookies commented that the number of seats seemed a bit excessive. Only 30 of them were in attendance. Yet there were hundreds of seats available. Well, that's because, as the World Union Academy's name suggests, this institute gathers the cream of the crop from all over the world. If you look up into the sky, you'll truly understand what that means. Dozens of majestic airships and dragon carriages flew overhead, blanketing the sun. Looking up, Gray recognized the biggest magic airship as the Strato Queen. He'd once boarded this hulking beast when he was cannon fodder for the Liquidator Subjugation Squad. It certainly lives up to its reputation, bringing out something so imposing for a simple entrance ceremony is just another way to flex on the newbies. The World Union Academy sure knows how to flaunt its power. Once every ship had landed safely, students who passed the strict entrance Exams in their own corners of the world stepped out. They took the remaining seats, quickly filling up the stands. With everyone gathered, it's finally time to get started. The staff member who materialized the arena signaled the start of the rest of their lives. After all the flashy displays of influence, the entrance ceremony proceeded with a brief speech, courtesy of the headmaster himself. Gray was feeling a little bored in his seat, even though he was entering the most prestigious academy in the entire world. This whole ceremony, honestly, felt like just another tedious assembly. Next up, the headmaster called the top students from each course to the podium. The guy sitting beside Gray stood up. Blondie's name? Leon Hart, the top student of the swordsmanship course. As he confidently descended the stairs, gossip about his incredible feat of defeating the examiner in an instant started to spread. Some even say this rookie is already as good as any of the professors. When it comes to swordplay, Leon Hart Alpias looks like he's a spy tasked with starting a fake family with an assassin and a little girl who can read minds. Gray was not impressed, just a little curious. Before starting his speech, Leon Hart confirmed he was allowed to speak freely from the heart. Once given the go signal, he turned to his fellow rookies with a sharp gaze. He opened his speech by lodging a formal complaint to the academy. First of all, he congratulated his peers, who were admitted the proper way. He sees it as a huge honor to be among the best of the current generation. Leon Hart hopes that they all graduate as people capable of making meaningful contributions to the world. For that, they must work together. He looks forward to the day when he and his peers soar as proud students of the prestigious World Union Academy. With that out of the way, he pointed out that there was someone among us, someone who doesn't deserve to be in this plaza at all. He directed this accusation directly to Professor Ariel, who oversees the special admissions of the Divine Eye. She was quite shocked to be called out by a freshman on the first day of classes. Professor Ariel asserted that every single student here has passed the rigorous exam. They may not be as dominant as Leon Hart, but they show that they rightfully belong. Curious and fascinated, she asked the cocky rookie why he was yapping. Like a little b******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* candidly brought up the mystery candidate, who was admitted through an obsolete backdoor system. Like everyone else, he sees the divine, seeing special admissions as just a way to sneak unqualified students right into the academy. Leon Hart roared that the specially admitted students should just show themselves, return their honorable uniform, and leave in shame. His fierce words and bold decisiveness seemed to sway the other rookies. Meanwhile, the one being singled out was trying to blend in. Thankfully, that hostile overachiever doesn't know Gray's face. If he just stays silent, he shouldn't get in trouble, right? Professor Ariel had to step in and break the tension, praising this year's batch for their liveliness. Refusing to stand down, Leon Hart doubled down on his opinions about admitting students through an outdated course. Growing a little annoyed with Blondie, Professor Ariel ominously asked if he was confident he could beat the kid she selected for a course. Leon had to take a few steps back. Upon feeling the pressure from the enigmatic professor, he tried to stammer a reply, but he couldn't. Gritting his teeth and composing himself, Leon Hart confidently answered that he could beat the dog shit out of that unqualified student. Ariel was already expecting such a reply. She likes boys with attitude, so she proposed a wager. She would willingly put her job on the line and that kid's future in this academy at stake. Gray doesn't like the sound of that bet at all. Leon Hart asked if this wager would be a straight-up brawl with the special admission kid, but Professor Ariel wouldn't do such a boring and boorish thing. She's also certain that if her boy goes all out, little Leon would end up dead in a ditch. As an educator, she can't possibly put a promising student's life at risk. Her words cut through Leon Hart's pride like a hot knife through butter. If she was trying to rage bait him into making a bet, it certainly worked. Professor Ariel proposed that they make the wager about monster subjugation instead. That way, it'll be a little safer for every party involved. Besides, she knows that Leon Hart excels at fighting monsters more than against humans. The rules are simple. Both participants must kill the monster she picks as targets each round. The target monster will increase in strength, and whoever gives up first and fails to subjugate the target loses. If her boy loses, she will gladly retire from her respected position as a professor and expel every special admission student under her care. But if little Leon loses, he'll have to do whatever she says. I know a lot of you would accept being red. Hair Professor's slave in a heartbeat before accepting. Leon Hart asked what the first target monster would be. Although he's confident he can handle and execute any opponent, he'd rather not be caught up in some weird crap. After a little deliberation, she came up with the perfect first target. She wants the head of an ogre general on her desk. If it's too easy for little Leon, she would gladly increase the difficulty. But based on the crowd's reaction, there's no need for that. While everyone was calling her demands over the top, Gray was trying to figure out why she would pick an ogre general specifically, a monster he had already slain. Leon, on the other hand, banged his fist on the podium. He vehemently argued that an ogre general is not a monster that someone can subjugate on a solo run. Seeing Blondie protest, she lowered the difficulty and set the time frame for the whole year. Little Leon still refused to play along. He argued that if someone could single-handedly kill a disaster-level monster with just a year of training, people wouldn't suffer if they're to go through with this absurd bet. This pussy demanded a more realistic target. Then he got it through his head that this clever woman deliberately chose a monster no one can defeat, so they could end the bet without a clear winner. Since he kept on bitching, Professor Ariel relented and added one more stipulation to the bet. If it results in a draw, little Leon wins. In other words, if her boy fails to defeat the ogre general within a year, she'll gladly step down and expel all her special students, with every stipulation crafted to give Leon every possible advantage. He'd look like a total coward if he still refused. Lloyd Forger has to realize he's being played here, and that the outcome is already decided. But he was completely swept up by the professor's manipulation, forced to accept a seemingly airtight wager. For the record, he asked if a weakened or injured General Ogre would count. It goes without saying that the monster had to be in its natural fighting form to seal the deal. The eye under the professor's monocle glowed as her magic wove a binding contract. Every single detail had been meticulously listed and imprinted within the magic contract. All little Leon had to do was sign it if he was ready, with the entire faculty and every other freshman as witnesses. He willingly signed his name on the arcane document. After finalizing the deal, he hesitantly asked if the kid admitted through the back door could seriously win. Professor Ariel didn't bother giving him a straight answer. The other professors just watched from their seats, seemingly used to the old, red-haired raccoons' shenanigans. They all saw her as a mage well past her prime, bored and just doing random stuff for kicks and giggles. In his seat, Gray sighed in defeat, as the bet to determine his future was officialized, utterly out of his control. He also noticed that she deliberately worded the stipulations to include the ogre general he killed within the time frame. This bet was a done deal the moment it began. Professor Ariel played Leon and everyone else, and Gray was the only one who saw it. She sure plays dirty, but having someone like that in your corner is a massive boon. After the bet fiasco, the entrance ceremony concluded, and the rookies were funneled into their first lecture, The Basics of Magic. The professor in charge of the class acknowledged that it's a bit surprising to start a lecture on the very first day of classes. He wanted his students to get used to this pace. In this academy, they cannot afford to waste a single day. Today they will start with the most basic of basics. The simple utilization of magic within a human's body lies an invisible energy called ether. One can manipulate the magic circuits in the body and tap into untold amounts of power. Gray was initially afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep up with the classes, but this first lecture looked manageable. He already heard the same explanations back at the subjugation boot camp. Nevertheless, he was unlucky with his class assignment. Out of all the introductory classes in magic, he ended up in the same class as Leonhard Appius. If people find out that he's the hated divine, I's special admission student. He can kiss his piece goodbye. While he was lost in thought, the professor noticed and singled him out for looking. Bored by the lecture, the professor felt offended that a rookie was already looking away less than 5 minutes into his introductory course. Gray immediately apologized for his wandering gaze. Still, he found it weird that the professor singled him out even though he was all the way at the very back of the lecture hall. The professor escalated the situation and demanded a demonstration from a distracted student. If he looks bored in an introductory class, that must mean he can use basic magic, right? Gray wasn't easy to bully respectfully. He insisted that he specializes in swordsmanship. He thought it would be fine if he couldn't use magic. The professor barked that even if one uses a sword in a real fighter still needs to learn the basics to coordinate with an allied mage. Learning the basics of magic and grasping how it feels is the least a swordsman can do. At that moment, Gray remembered hearing the same thing from the boot camp lectures. In that case, today's lecture might conclude with the same spell. To confirm, he asked if today's lecture is aimed at learning the simple, yet effective ether bullet, since he knows the name. The professor assumed that he could use it. Gray thanked the gods for the hellish boot camp he had grind through. Seeing this as a prime opportunity for a proper demonstration, the professor decided to make it a one-on-one match and called up this year's top swordsman, Leon, onto the stage. Blondie readily stood up and paid his respects to the professor. With that said, he explained he'd trained in sword and magic long before he even started school, so it might be a bit risky for a normie to go up against him. The professor quickly asserted that no matter the skill gap, ether bullets are non-lethal, so there's no need to hold back. In addition, he revealed that Gray is this year's Divine Eye student, knowing how much Leon despises the nameless backdoor student. Every student in the lecture hall turned to Gray, committing his face to memory. This was a setup from the very start. He couldn't even get through the day without being doxxed by a freaking professor. That old fart deliberately revealed his identity with nefarious intent. Hearing he had a chance to shoot a literal bullet through the guy he hates, Leon readily accepted to show the backdoor baby the ropes. This is an opportunity to show an unqualified outsider what kind of place World Union Academy really is. With his veins popping out in rage, he demanded that Gray step the fuck down. This is not how our boy's first day was supposed to go. On the stage, they stood opposite each other while the stir professor explained the rules. He would give a signal, and both parties would shoot ether bullets at their opponent. Gray only spent a few days learning basic magic at the boot camp. Sure, the professor said the bullets aren't lethal, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't hurt. As soon as the go signal was given, Leon Hart gathered a hefty amount of ether in his hands, determined to show the true difference in strength between a real and fake student. Pushed to the corner and forced to protect himself, Gray also gathered and manipulated his ether, throwing all his prior knowledge into one desperate attempt. The entire lecture hall fell into stunned silence as their eyes locked onto a massive black hole. It was threatening to swallow a tiny, unassuming bullet hole. Both Leon and Gray were utterly flabbergasted. Neither of them had expected this to happen, and just as anticipated, the minuscule ether bullet was completely consumed by the raging black hole. Leon's fear was starkly evident in his eyes as the obviously lethal spell inched closer to him. In a sudden panic, the professor raised his hand, trying his absolute hardest to prevent the worst-case scenario with his own magic. A golden barrier bravely blocked the seemingly relentless advance of the anomalous ether bullet. It managed to blunt most of the force driving the attack, but it was an incredibly close call. He made the mistake of letting up, and the golden barrier immediately started showing dangerous cracks under the immense pressure. Eventually, the ether bullet black hole reached its limit and spectacularly exploded, shattering the magic barrier into a million little specks of light. The resulting boom instantly threw the lecture hall into chaos. Rookies instinctively closed their eyes and braced themselves for impact. As for the target himself, poor Leon was knocked flat onto his ass, screaming bloody murder. Realizing that he'd severely messed up, the professor immediately ran towards the swordsmanship courses rising, started to make sure he was all right. Leon picked himself back up, wiped the dust, and assured the professor that he was perfectly fine. After ascertaining Blondie's well-being, the professor turned his attention to the one who almost blew the whole place sky high. Had the barrier failed to dampen the impact, that abnormal ether bullet could have killed Leon and injured many others. Even amongst veteran magic professors, no one could cast an ether bullet that strong in the academy. He desperately wanted to know what the young man did to produce such a destructive output. Gray himself was confused. What he had just unleashed was definitely on another level, compared to the feeble thing his opponent had thrown. Could the spell he learned as part of the subjugation squad differ from the one they taught at the academy? He asked the professor if he had messed up in any way, but the old man was absolutely certain he'd just fired an ether bullet. The only glaring difference was the spell's sheer quality. What Gray just used to power it up was anything but normal ether. That kind of size and power can only be achieved through the use of super compressed ether. None of the rookies had ever heard or even understood the term super compressed ether. It's something even experienced professors struggle to produce and study. Yet this controversial student casually used it to transform a basic spell. No one in this academy could replicate that. Now the students are starting to feel respect and a healthy dose of fear for the guy who got admitted through the divine eye. They also protested that Gray should have been enrolled in the magic course. Instead, as far as he remembers, all spells learned by the subjugation squad were precisely like the one he just used. Among the group, Gray was one of those who had no aptitude for it, still refusing to believe he's using some sort of juiced-up ether. He summoned another ether bullet and insisted that pulling off something like this is possible for anyone with enough practice. Much to his confusion, the professor just laughed like a madman in response. Gray didn't know what to do, so he just stood there dumbfounded. The professor shifted his tone entirely. At the start of class, he was blatantly hostile. Now, he's trying to recruit the special admission student into the magic course. Gray respectfully declined the enthusiastic invitation. He was always told he had no talent for magic, so he couldn't see himself getting into it now. The professor found this refusal preposterous. If a young man who can produce super compressed ether through compression is talentless, then everyone else should just quit magic. He even went as far as dubbing Gray an unparalleled prodigy, even by academy standards. Whoever said that the kid had no talent for magic must be smoking some illegal substances. The rookies watched the scene in silence. They saw how the strict professor turned into a completely different person as he desperately tried to persuade Gray to switch into the magic department. From his perspective, it would be a huge loss for the world if Gray didn't pursue magic. Heck, it would be a crime against the arcane. With all that intense flattery coming his way, all the young man could do was laugh at the sheer absurdity. Then, he suddenly remembered hearing the term ether compression technique once before. It was just another clear day at the boot camp, and one of the heroes was conducting a lecture. She chronicled how, in the past, people didn't know OD, also known as life force, actually existed. Due to that massive gap in knowledge, it was very difficult to cast proper magic. One had to continuously compress ether within the body to achieve the desired effect through a spell. This primitive method only gathered a tiny bit of OD. The lecturer, Miss Bella Albright, the great sage and the strongest mage of the future, found the way they practiced magic just a decade ago absolutely laughable. Gray asked the professor if he had ever heard of OD. The question completely stumped the old man. He was not familiar with the term at all. Judging by that reaction, it sounds like the world still hasn't discovered this revolutionary magic concept at this point in time. If that's the case, then the basic stuff Gray learned in the subjugation squad can be considered knowledge from the future. He finally realized that he must be careful not to leak this type of information. For one last time, he refused the incessant offer to transfer to a different course. His true love is the sword, so he would have to pass. The professor sighed in defeat and helplessly accepted the young man's decision to stick with blades, but he also left Gray an open door, invitation to shift departments whenever he feels like it. Feeling a headache coming on, the young man awkwardly thanked the animated geezer for the generous offer. After that intense demonstration, both participants were asked to go back to their seats. The professor promised to never chide Gray anymore during class. In fact, he wouldn't mind if the kid left if he ever got bored. The professor believes this baby-level magic is far too basic for a true prodigy like Gray. Gray descended the stairs, subjected to a barrage of hostile glares. Now, he's ascending with reverence from the professor and his peers. Meanwhile, his victim was still standing on the ruined stage, blushing and feeling his lion heart beating fast. For Lord Gray, he didn't see how Lionheart looked down there, but Gray certainly felt a chill crawling up his spine. After the first lecture, he received a personal note from Professor Ariel, asking him to meet at her office after classes. He basically got summoned completely out of the blue. It would be troublesome if old Professor Carlos were behind this sudden summons. After walking around for a few minutes, he finally found the office door. That bore the mark of the divine eye. He intended to knock, but the door softly opened, gently letting him in. Taking the unlocked door as an invitation, Gray respectfully entered, while uttering respectful greetings. Before he could finish his sentence, he sensed a sharp blade coming his way from the side. Gray's reflexes automatically kicked in as he drew his sword to defend. The grip was a little unorthodox, but got the job done in a pinch. He was able to sweep the sneak attack and the attacker away. With the attacker swatted away, Gray realized that he had moved purely on instinct. This time around, he wanted to confront the assailant, but it was just a blue-haired young woman who couldn't even grip the sword in her hand properly. Upon closer look, Gray realized that he knew this girl all too well. This shorty will become an unshakable pillar of humanity and hope in the future. Gray's attention was then directed to the desk in the back of the office, and the woman sitting on it praised his quick response. Professor Ariel was pleased to confirm that her eyes were spot on when she evaluated the young man in the entrance exam. There were two other men in the room, Ariel's fellow professors, who were still skeptical of the new addition to the divine eye's gaze. They judged Bella's movements flawless, yet her sword was disarmed far too easily. Hearing the name, the ultimate mage from Gray's past life came flooding back. Who would have thought that this sorceress would look so quaint in her younger years? Meanwhile, Ariel was hassling her colleagues to just admit they were wrong, instead of making excuses. In the end, the other professors ponied up and paid their gambling addict colleague her winnings. They observed the split-second exchange at the door and had to admit Gray was here for a reason. Confused and uncomfortable, the young man asked what was happening and why he was called on. Ariel simply explained. Her explanation? That they were betting on whether the new kid could fend off a surprise attack from Bella or not. Thanks to that, she made some good money today. As thanks, she tossed a portion of her winnings to her new student. He promptly caught the coin and found a glimmering gold piece in his hand. A single gold coin is practically a small fortune, although they admittedly lost the wager. The other professors also brought up a glaring detail they had missed in the entrance exam. From that exchange earlier, they became certain that the young man deliberately avoided using his dominant arm to defend. It was almost as if he was trying to protect an immobile arm. The most likely explanation for that quirk would be an injury, but rather than an obvious physical injury to the muscles that any professor would see through. This kid is suffering from a deeper kind of wound. A simple injury wouldn't cause someone to tense up in such an unfamiliarly hostile ambush. Gray was surprised that the professors had deduced so many details correctly just by watching him draw his blade to defend. Well, they're educators in the most prestigious educational institution for a reason. Even if they were slower to notice than Ariel, they still managed to piece together a clear picture. With that, Ariel shooed her co-workers away, now that she had their money in hand. They missed out on a truly rare find, and she wouldn't give Gray up for anything. For now, the professors would gladly admit that the kid truly has potential. But if that wound doesn't heal and continues to fester, Gray will remain forever branded as the guy who failed to meet the Academy's standards. It was accepted anyway. He did not like the threatening cut of that professor's tongue one bit. At all. When the skeptical professors vacated the office, only Ariel and her students remained inside. With the nuisances finally out of the way, it was time to begin the true agenda of this summons. She called them today to discuss the topic of magic. After serving some aromatic tea, Professor Ariel reiterated what she'd heard. Happened in Professor Carlos's class. She found out from the man himself that persistent idiot had stormed into her office, demanding the new kids transfer to the magic course. She obviously declined such a ridiculous request. In her scrutinizing eyes, Gray would become a far scarier beast, wielding a sword rather than magic. Upon removing her monocle, to elaborate on what she meant by that, Gray was stunned. Professor Ariel didn't see signs of genius in magic compression at all. He didn't even show signs of having practiced magic. On a deeper level, Gray felt a little unsettled after getting scanned and read like an open book. With that bizarre, all-seeing eye, his line would be utterly useless in this situation. Ray admitted that all of what she'd speculated was correct. Curious, she gently asked if he'd be willing to share the trick used to conjure that black hole. Ether bullet. She promised complete discretion and a reward in exchange for that valuable intel. She truly wanted to know about this promising concept for Bella's sake. While sipping on tea, Gray's tongue almost slipped and called the young Bella by her future title. Professor Ariel declared the young woman a pure genius when it came to magic theory. Yet, she lacked the ability to wield her own theories. For some unknown reason, she had no capacity to use ether compression, let alone the mythical super compression, based on some loose intel from the future. He knew Bella Albright was a late bloomer. Her lack of talent in practical magic must be why Ariel arranged this meeting, especially after hearing about the super compressed ether bullet that nearly killed Leon. If there's a way to use super compressed ether without the inefficient act of internal compression, it will be a total game changer. Professor Ariel is desperate for solutions. She doesn't want to see one of her girls sent to Professor Bradley. Everyone in the future knew that name. A cursed name, impossible not to be aware of. An extremely infamous grade A bastard. He conducted countless independent human experiments for the sake of advancing his field, murdering many in the process. On top of that, he would cause cataclysmic magic disasters that would claim the lives of tens of thousands. Professor Bradley is history's worst magic criminal in existence in this era. The deranged, mass-murdering, magical terrorist hasn't been caught yet. If Bella can't create super-compressed ether, by the end of the year, she will be sent to the deranged professor to undergo a high-risk surgery. Anyone with common sense would see this as a bad idea. Professor Ariel could not agree more. Though the surgery is under the pretense of enhancing magic abilities, it's just blatant human experimentation. With no certainty, it hasn't been made public yet, but she's already hearing rumors of the lunatics. Inhumane crimes. Some victims have died, while others were left broken beyond hope. Bella chimed in that although it's dangerous and scary, she will be expelled by the end of the year if she doesn't produce any results. In all honesty, Professor Ariel would rather have her girl quit magic and the academy for good than have that perv mess with Bella's body. Gray quietly pondered his next move. He holds magic theories that simply shouldn't exist. Yet, if he shares something so revolutionary, the entire course of history will completely veer off track. He then watched young Bella, clenching her fists, gripped by frustration and fear. Gray remembered his last moments facing the liquidator. That raw frustration, fear, and utter hopelessness felt way too familiar. He was just cannon fodder, trained only to fall in one shot. A helpless spectator, while the heroes, meant to save the world, were mercilessly sliced apart like fresh meat, knowing the grim future that awaited him. If he didn't make some drastic moves, why wouldn't he want to change the course of history? That hellhole people called the future was definitely much better off changed. By the time his tea was finished, he had agreed to try and teach Bella as best he could. She'd be using super compressed ether in no time. After the meeting, the three headed to the arena as the sun began to set. Gray busted out the chalkboard and tried his best to articulate what he'd learned from those grueling boot camp lectures. After squeezing out every bit he could remember, he asked the girls to keep this privileged information strictly amongst themselves. Information leaks, however, wouldn't be a problem, since the professor had drafted a magic contract beforehand. Those who break the contract shall die. After giving them the full rundown, Gray asked what they thought about his theory. Just learning about the concept of OD alone was enough to absolutely blow Professor Ariel's mind, but the sheer knowledge of magic he'd revealed was even more absurd. Bella praised his explanation, calling it brief, yet incredibly well organized. She felt like she was listening to a lecture on magic from hundreds of years in the future, with Bella simply hearing and absorbing this massive info dump. The history of magic had just advanced by 100 years, right there in that very room. She kept gushing about advancing magic by a century, but Gray himself had learned all these basic concepts from the grown-up sorceress. Just 10 years from now, a true testament to her genius. The sheer amount of information, even Professor Ariel herself couldn't properly grasp or judge, so she deferred to her little magic prodigy. According to Bella's rough estimation, the theory has a good chance of being sound. Not a single concept contradicts the current magic theory that the world currently runs on. But the quickest way to know for sure is to test it out. That's why they occupied the arena. If the theory holds water, the impromptu spell Bella quickly whipped up should work. Holding her staff in both hands, she placed her trust in Grace's teachings and tapped into her full power. That doesn't sound like a good thing. If he remembers correctly, Bella Albright's strength is rumored to be capable of burning an entire city down in an instant. She's practically a weapon of mass destruction. What's more, she was infamous for having no proper control over her powerful magic output. Today must be the day he witnesses that legendary display of dominance. Even Bella was shocked by what she just kicked off. A gigantic blaze of scorching fire shot out, escaping from the middle of the arena and soaring into the clouds. Gray tried to warn her against this reckless idea, but it was too late. The pillar of flame stood tall, with the young mage at its foundation, holding up an imposing magic circle. This overwhelming power stood at the pinnacle of magic. In his past life, if Bella hadn't taken control of the spell a split second earlier, he would have been swallowed by the blaze. That fine, elemental manipulation literally saved his life. Oblivious to everyone else's fear, Bella was beaming with joy. She finally did it. She bridged the gap between her theoretical and practical talents, pushing herself even harder. She proceeded to tame the flaming pillar, shaping it into a roaring, fiery dragon. For the first time in her life, she genuinely found magic fun, completely swept up in the moment, only to quickly gas herself out. The fire sputtered and died, and she felt the drawback of her experiment right away. As her ether reserves completely dried up, her legs gave out, and she lost consciousness. The staff clattered to the floor, and her body followed suit. A worried Gray rushed to the unconscious girl, while the professor told him to chill out. This collapse is a classic case of ether depletion. All Bella needs is a little bit of rest, and she'll be back to 100% in no time. Hearing that assuaged Gray's worries. Still, even Ariel was utterly astounded by the marvelous display of magical talent the young woman had displayed. She might be the only person who can put together magic on such a massive scale. Even after learning a new concept while completely out of it, the napping mage mumbled that it's not her who is amazing, but the theory Gray gave her, the tool to easily create her own super compressed ether. Well, it was a tool she was supposed to develop far in the future. Ariel sighed in profound relief. Bella no longer needs that shady surgery from that arcane criminal. She would gladly curse Bradley off herself. The professor was glad to see the young mage avoid such a ruinous path. She's especially glad that she didn't lose her magic control through some unsanctioned experiment. Although Bradley's special surgeries were proven to increase one's magical output, they come at the dire expense of control. Exactly how it works remains a mystery, but it's highly likely that the lunatic found a way to forcibly break a person's limiter. Now it makes sense why the sorceress in the past world was rumored to be an out-of-control weapon of mass destruction. In any case, today's massive progress would not have been possible without Gray's help. Their contract terms have officially been fulfilled. Now, the professor must uphold her end of the deal, all carefully detailed on the magic paper. First up, she'd promised to fix his injured arm. Luckily, she has a potent magic spell that could help. With a graceful hand extended, she summoned countless, shimmering, translucent butterflies. Made of pure ether, they fluttered to life. The butterflies flew all around the arena. Then, she gently touched her student's outstretched hand. The moment their skin made contact, the surrounding ether swirled and stirred with new energy, coalescing intensely at their point of connection. For just a few seconds, Gray openly accepted the healing touch, full of hope. Afterward, he cautiously tried clenching his injured hand and immediately felt a drastic difference in comfort. It was vastly more comfortable than before. He could finally move his dominant hand freely again. This was truly a vast improvement. With his spirits soaring, he wholeheartedly thanked the professor for her incredible aid, for solving one of his most agonizing problems. Not even a potent magic healing potion could fully cure his mysterious injury. Yet her light, ethereal touch did the trick. She boasted that her nerve restoring magic shouldn't even be mentioned in the same breath as average healing magic, healing potions. But before they got carried away, she wanted to confirm he was truly back to 100%. To test this, Gray needed to try swinging a sword. For the first time in what felt like forever, he gripped the hilt of his blade with his dominant hand. He performed a quick draw, casually slashing the air. Immediately, he noticed something deeply alarming. Despite his arm's supposed full recovery, to confirm his fears, he lowered his stance and expertly went through the motions of his swordplay to see how it felt. But much to his dismay, his right arm still fell off. It still didn't move as fluidly as it once had. Professor Ariel had anticipated this very outcome. While she had repaired the nerves to their perfect state, her magic simply couldn't heal the wounds in his soul. Hearing her mention his soul utterly confused Gray. While today's mainstream magical knowledge hasn't proven the existence of the human soul, Ariel is a firm, unwavering believer that it does exist. After all, she can see it herself with her special eye. Hidden beneath that dazzling monocle is an all-seeing eye that pierces through all. And right now, she can see Gray's very soul slowly mending over time. Her theory? That, as long as he doesn't overexert himself, he will recover naturally. Gray innocently asked if practicing his swordplay would count as overexertion. The professor replied that it wouldn't. He could train normally, but beyond that, she asked him what kind of swordsmanship he practiced that could damage one's very soul so profoundly. Then again, swordplay that harnesses one's soul as fuel is actually not a new concept. In fact, she knows someone who possesses that very same capability. Amy White is another student of the Divine Eye. Special admission course. She reckoned that there must be some connection between these two students of hers. Gray was shaken and confused as to why Professor Ariel would think that way. He hasn't even encountered the future Sword Saint. In this timeline, Ariel assumed Gray knew Amy, based on the way he wielded his sword. It gives the distinct impression that he learned it from that sword nerd. On second thought, the professor did notice some subtle differences. It felt like the person he learned swordplay from was a far more skilled version of little Amy. She estimates that in just a few years, Amy will be just as skilled as whoever Gray's master was. Her deduction ability is simply terrifying. Her eye can see the fine details and interpret them with unmatched expertise. Gray asserted that he learned to wield a sword at his hometown dojo, which is technically not a lie. For now, he needs to change the topic, or risk spilling his secrets. But back to the subject of damaged souls and swordsmanship. Ordinary techniques cannot possibly connect these two intangible concepts. For starters, she's well aware that Gray possesses some secret move that can defeat an ogre general, an entire ogre army, and everything around with one single slash. She's already done her homework. Thanks to Gray's absolutely absurd accomplishments, the bet she made with little Leon at the entrance ceremony, a total cakewalk. Ariel examined the remains left at the scene and declared them simply magnificent. Not even the most sophisticated cleaving magic could achieve such precision and lethality, that mysterious power in Gray. Whatever it is caused the injury to his very soul. She can see it with her own eyes. Ariel can peer right into his soul and glimpse the power leaking from a chain door. Hearing her say that instantly made him a believer. The chain door was the exact imagery he kept picturing inside his own mind. This isn't something anyone could figure out by guesswork. This woman is the real deal. That said, however, Ariel had seen power similar to Grace before. While it wasn't a one-to-one copy, they had a very similar vibe. Curious, he asked if there were other people with similarly mysterious powers like his own. She knows of one that fits the description, but she's not 100% sure if they're even human. Professor Ariel called it the Liquidator, the same Liquidator who ushered in the end of the world. Based on his reaction, she could tell the kid had definitely heard of them. One way or another, Gray's mind was reeling. Why is the Liquidator being mentioned? This early in the timeline, the sultry professor hadn't expected the young man to be familiar with such an esoteric being. But then again, he does know some futuristic magic theory, so it's not that big of a surprise. Gray felt a little awkward being credited with the revolutionary theory when he had simply reiterated what he'd learned from the real genius. Curious, Ariel pressed him further about how much he knew about this Liquidator. In all honesty, he didn't know much, but he was certain that the Liquidator is an extremely dangerous threat to humanity. That creature absolutely has to be stopped before he can amass even more power, something that must be obliterated no matter the cost. Ariel found his perspective a tad too extreme, but she agreed the Liquidator posed a serious threat. Even so, Bailey and Bradley seems hell-bent on continuing his experiments on this very subject. It seems the future cataclysm, the apocalypse, is somehow linked to the infamous magic terrorist. As far as Ariel knows, the Liquidator is the very entity Bailey and Bradley is trying to summon. This revelation was news to Gray. No one had ever told him the origin of humanity's foe. Thinking back, the Academy in the last timeline served as a pivotal point in history. The higher-ups acted as if they knew exactly where the Liquidator would appear. There's a strong possibility that the World Union Academy itself had a hand in summoning the Liquidator. All along, the professor and the secretary of freshmen agreed that this incredibly reckless experiment absolutely had to be stopped before it got completely out of hand. Unfortunately, though, the one conducting these studies is also a tenured professor. Ariel doesn't have the authority to shut him or his dangerous experiments down. She already tried to pressure the higher-ups to act, but they simply wouldn't listen. Unfortunately, she lacks the authority to divulge any more information to a mere student. The bottom line is, unless orders come from above, no one can force Bailey and Bradley to stop his lunacy. Gray was hoping to at least get the names of the Academy's higher-ups, but that's completely out of the question for now. It looks like the Academy's leadership is far more tangled than he initially thought. But if he can prove that Professor Bradley is a truly dangerous criminal, maybe they'll have enough ammunition to change things. In a previous timeline, Balin's illegal experiments claimed the lives of tens of thousands, and Gray knows exactly where these atrocities will happen. There shouldn't be any harm in sharing this critical information with Professor Ariel. This way, they can catch the maniac red-handed. But she outrightly shot down the idea. Entering an Academy professor's research facility without permission is considered a heinous crime. On their own, they might have to dig up some serious evidence, but in a different, more complicated way, without risking jail time themselves. But if Gray can provide some solid proof right now, that could change everything. If not, then they'll have no choice but to put this idea on the back burner for now. It sounds like Ariel's well aware of the potential dangers, but her hands are tied by all the bureaucracy and academy politics. It's frustrating, but understandable. More importantly, she wants to really delve deeper into Gray's mysterious power. She teases that there just might be a way to learn how to control that lethal weapon. There's a professor right here in the academy who's a specialist at handling unknown forces. In Gray's case, is the perfect puzzle to solve. Professor Heathcote Longfellow is his name. Gray had heard that name before. Heathcote Longfellow. Longfellow was the one who trained the Sword Saint herself. He's a truly legendary figure. Ariel knew this. Idea would definitely grab the young man's interest. She promised to arrange a private training session with the stoic professor for tomorrow. Gray gratefully accepted Ariel's aid. The very reason he came to the academy was to master this power. After all, he didn't expect to find such a solid lead so quickly. Things are finally looking up. The very next day, Gray found himself in close proximity to the stern professor. His first private lesson from Heathcote. Longfellow was underway. Ariel certainly worked fast. Gray expected some hardcore training or extensive theoretical lessons. But Professor Longfellow dragged him straight to the woods. And now they're just running in circles. They're still inside the academy zone, but they're in the middle of a thick patch of forest. While he was trying to figure out the purpose of this aimless running, Professor Longfellow scolded him for letting his mind wander. Instead of thinking stray thoughts, he should be picking up his pace. Instead, they must run and push their bodies to their absolute limits. Longfellow believes the true power of the soul truly awakens once every last drop of physical strength is burned away. Gray is forbidden from even touching his sword until every last iota of his stamina has been completely spent. The young man can't quite see the bigger picture yet, but he utterly trusts Heathcote's unconventional methods. Still, while Gray's out here running endless laps, Balian is conducting truly inhuman experiments, all to summon the terrifying arbiter of the end. It's tough to shake off that nagging thought, isn't it? Gray is burdened by the weight of his future sight, and it's definitely slowing him down. Nevertheless, he stuck with his grueling training regimen for an entire week. On the 7th day, he was summoned to report back to Professor Ariel herself. Gray felt a little embarrassed, knowing all he'd really done was endless running and a few meager sword drills. At the very end, admittedly, he did feel a slight improvement in his strength. And Ariel couldn't help but let out an amused laugh. She was well aware of Heathcote's bizarre, unorthodox methods. With the report concluded, a messenger politely entered the office. He handed her a sealed letter, specifically addressed to Professor Ariel. She immediately tore open the message, and her expression slowly twisted into a grimace as she read through the disturbing correspondence. By the time she reached the very end of the letter, she was utterly frozen in her seat. A worried Gray asked what on earth was wrong. She wordlessly handed him the letter, letting him see for himself. It would be better that way. It was a letter penned by none other than Balian Bradley. That lunatic had apparently received the report regarding Bella Albright's supercompressed ether breakthrough. He insisted that although there was a close resemblance, the young mage had not actually achieved the level reported. He therefore refused to recognize her new ability. Accordingly, the surgery contract remained valid, and the surgery shall proceed as scheduled. It was a preposterous, infuriating letter, clearly written by a master rage baiter. It was sheer insanity. Ariel was absolutely furious. It seems Balian Bradley is determined to get his hands on a prime guinea pig in the form of Bella. He's trying to force her into a completely unnecessary and dangerous procedure. Unfortunately, this maniac holds all the power. The magic contract Bella signed was airtight. Unless Bradley voids it himself, Bella is forced to choose between expulsion and surrendering her body to a madman. Gray refused to accept that bullshit. Ariel concurred. This letter lit a fire under her ass. To act with no regard for bureaucracy. And she needs Gray's help. She needs to know the location of Bradley's secret lab. It will be risky, but she must expose that bitch as a criminal to render the outrageous contract null and void. Finally, she's down to getting her hands dirty. This is precisely what Gray needs. Gloatingly, he asked why she had changed her mind when exposing a fellow professor without solid proof on hand, which poses a risk that is too high. Well, they're past working within the bounds of the law. She's putting her faith in Gray in order to protect another, one of her precious students. From the very start, I had foreseen that this would happen. That Gray had been telling the truth this entire time. It took some time and a blatantly absurd letter to admit it, but Ariel is finally awake. It's time for Gray to lead the way, guided by knowledge of the future. Together, they will bring that psycho's crimes against humanity to light. The Dark Swordsman returns. As far as he knows, that vile laboratory is hidden in the mountains, near the village of Toriel. Professor Ariel vaguely recalls news that one of the other faculty members have been given authorization to construct a lab there. This means those illegal and inhumane experiments have been sanctioned by the Academy. There is no better place to conduct the legal research than the mountains of Toriel. Practically, no one will bat an eyelid if he stays there for long. To top it all off, the Academy's professors rigidly respect an unwritten rule, which strictly forbids meddling in one another's projects. However, if they can only gather sufficient evidence to prove that horrendous crimes against humanity are actively being committed, they won't be charged with breaking and entering. Just as they were finalizing their attack plan, Bella then knocked, and Ariel promptly let her inside. It turned out she had just received a letter delivering truly ghastly news. Her emotions were instantly thrown into turmoil, with an overwhelming sense of utter defeat. Professor Ariel quickly snatched the letter from her, assuring Bella that this entire mess would be handled, no matter what it takes. It sounds like Ariel intends to confront Varian Bradley all alone, and Bella absolutely will not stand for that. Sporting a confident smile, she boldly insisted she could solo that bastard. Any day, any time. The worried young lady shot Gray a pleading look, begging him to intervene. So he stepped forward, pledging to join the professor, thereby stealing her resolve to go alone. Bella, not to be outdone, also volunteered to tag along. She refused to just rely on everyone else to solve her own problem. Ariel, however, thought she could simply go alone. She warned them, Varian is a highly seasoned professor, and not just that, he's also a complete lunatic with no regard for human life. If he ever catches an inexperienced student attempting to foil his sinister plans, there's no telling what horrific things he might do. As the only adult in this discussion, she absolutely couldn't risk these young kids. But Gray argued this was precisely why. Going alone was even more dangerous. He confidently asserted he could tap into the very power he once used to defeat an ogre general. If the need arose, he wouldn't be dead weight. Besides, if anything were to happen to Ariel, then, inevitably, the Divine Eye program would undoubtedly be dissolved, effectively expelling Gray and all his peers. He'd much rather have a say in his own future, a real choice to decide their own fate. Seeing the unwavering determination in their eyes, Ariel found it impossible to refuse. They made it sound like they'd come anyway, even if she strictly forbade it. In that case, then, she'd agree to make this a team mission. Under one critical condition, no matter what, they must prioritize their own safety. Above all else, Gray and Bella eagerly accepted her terms. After taking some final precautionary measures, the three ventured into the ominous Torowell Mountains. Hidden deep within these mountains, Varian Bradley's sprawling private laboratory came into view. It's terrifying to imagine what horrors are unfolding within those towering walls. Let's reiterate, the primary objective of this mission is simply to gather evidence of criminal activity. Nothing more, nothing less. With a clear fury in his eyes, Gray confirmed they'd found their target. Bella, on the other hand, felt a wave of apprehension. She doubted if they could truly pull this off without any serious trouble. Professor Ariel had already done her research. Dr. Varian, Bradley should currently be at the Magic Society's conference. Right now, the lab should be empty of him. Yet there's a strong chance. The main gate is riddled with every kind of trap imaginable. So to be safe, they should just bust through the sidewall and force their own entrance. Breaking into an academy. Authorized lab is already a crime. After all, it makes no difference what method they use to get in. For one last time, Ariel offered Bella the chance to turn back if she had second thoughts. Bella gripped her staff tightly and cast all her doubts aside. She then asked if the professor was truly willing to endure all this trouble for someone like her. But Gray interjected and quickly answered that this operation isn't just for her sake. Halting Varian Bradley's devious plans is for the sake of the entire world. If they don't act now, countless lives will be lost, and the entire world will suffer. Professor Ariel felt his reasoning was a bit dramatic, but she agreed that this twisted monster needed to be stopped. So Bella just needed to chill and clear her head. She wasn't the only one who needed saving. With all that said and done, Ariel led the way, dragging Bella along, while Gray ran alongside them at full speed. Upon reaching the side wall of the towering lab, she calmly activated a fiery spell. Multiple explosive streaks of flames tore through the concrete without any resistance. The resulting explosion lit up the entire mountain with a blinding, blistering light. You've got to hand it to the professor. She knows how to put on an over-the-top show. Gray was the first one to peek through the instant entrance. What he saw inside made his skin crawl. Laid before his eyes was a long, dark hallway, with countless jail cells lining both sides. Inside those cells were emaciated people, chained up and catatonic from extensive torture. Some of them looked dead. Some were missing limbs and bleeding out of their infected, open wounds. They knew they would find something, but they didn't expect it to happen so soon. There was no need to even make an effort to look for incriminating evidence. The group traversed the long hallway. Every single iron-barred cell was filled with Varian Bradley's victims. So far, Ariel had noted traces of 14 forbidden spells used on the prisoners. That fact alone should convict Varian of serious criminal offenses. There wasn't even a need to mention the extensive list of clear human rights violations committed in this place. Eventually, they came across a massive room in the middle of the lab. The floors were caked with old and fresh blood. At the center, an ominous magic circle could be seen. It looked like some sort of an altar. The initial plan was to get in, get some concrete evidence, then get out. But the kind young sorceress felt compelled to rescue the people trapped in this hellscape. Gray's gut twisted with a troubling premonition. They couldn't afford to linger in this cursed place. A rescue mission would simply take far too long, and Varian himself might return any minute before they could even formulate their next move. A spectral figure materialized from the deepening shadows. He strolled casually towards the terrified group, as if he owned the very ground they stood on. Professor Ariel's eyes widened in instant recognition. Creeping closer, it was none other than the man, the myth, the unbelievably ugly-ass mad scientist himself. Varian Bradley, bro. Thinking he possessed an intimidating aura, Gray instantly drew his sword, ready to counter whatever evil the madman would unleash. Varian Bradley practically preened with self-satisfaction that he'd sent a decoy to attend the conference, acting entirely in his stead. He was on the verge of a truly monumental breakthrough in his heinous experiments. After all, this man then crowed about getting his hands on some exceptionally fresh materials. He gloated, all for an undeniably crucial ceremony. You see, he prefers to use his human lab rats while they're still utterly fresh and very much breathing. But upon seeing Professor Ariel and her precious pupils right on his doorstep, he decided to pivot and drastically alter his plans. Ariel's heart pounded with fear for her students. Bella meanwhile, was frozen stiff by guttural terror, while Gray stood poised, ready to throw hands at any moment. Tonight's depraved experiment would yield a far superior result if the materials utilized happened to possess far greater magical potential than the average person. Varian had absolutely no clue, he admitted, how they discovered his secret little hell on Earth. But he was certain these three were operating entirely covertly, meaning they hadn't breathed a word to anyone about their destination. So, if they all just suddenly vanished without a trace, not a single soul would even know where to begin looking. Whatever twisted horror Varian had in store for them, it would never, ever lead to any suspicion. Forget the countless crimes against humanity he'd committed. Seriously, give this man the electric chair already. For that utterly creepy-ass, disturbing smile alone. From the chilling tenor of his villainous speech, it was clear, it was undeniably obvious that Professor Varian was absolutely itching to turn them into his next lab rats. Lab rats that would push the very boundaries of magic itself. All for an unimaginably steep, horrifying price. Since they had already uncovered all his dirty laundry, letting them live simply wasn't an option. He might as well exploit their magical potential to its absolute fullest. In the middle of his grandiose monologue, Varian spotted a massive fireball hurtling towards his dome. The spell detonated with a fiery boom that lit up the desiccated room. Surprisingly enough, the attack didn't come from Professor Ariel. It came from the future great sage herself, Bella Albright, with a determined expression. It seems her initial fear has vanished. Unfortunately, a sneak attack of this caliber just won't cut it. Varian protected himself with a barrier. In the nick of time, even so, he praised the girl's incredible potential and magnificent decisiveness. He attributed the discovery of such an exceptional talent to Ariel's divine eye. He had never really paid close attention to special admissions classes before. Perhaps he should start looking closer at the other recruits in that controversial batch. Nevertheless, a mere academy student trying to assassinate a professor would never work. The gap is too wide. Tossing away all her fears, Bella accepted that it would be better to get her hands bloody rather than be killed. She barely missed her chance. Though worried for her students, Ariel issued the order to retreat. They already have their evidence, and the academy should be able to handle the rest. Professor Varian won't just let them walk away freely before they could take one step. Away a burning, black energy shot out of the deranged Professor's scepter. In retaliation, his primary target was Bella. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. Ariel had to move quickly to take the brunt of the attack. With her radiant barrier, with utmost focus, she strengthened the barrier, while the dark energy persisted. Varian haughtily explained that defensive magic is pointless. This gluttony flame is one of the most prized fruits of his extensive research. This spell conjures a flame so ravenous that it burns and devours defensive magic, turning it into pure fuel. In theory, it's a perfect spell that simply cannot be blocked. Its only downside was the required use of some rare biological material to cast. As Varian explained, Ariel's barrier was quickly torn apart and consumed, making the gluttony flame bigger and wilder. She tried to salvage the situation by getting her divine eye involved. Tapping into that mysterious power bought her enough time to put up another barrier. When the first layer finally gave in, the second layer took the brunt of the supercharged, forbidden magic. As expected, Ariel's second barrier was also corroded and absorbed by the flame. In a matter of seconds, fearing the worst, she tossed a spell memory pouch to Bella and Gray. She reckoned that if Heathcote sees the pouch, he'll know exactly what to do. But instead of taking the evidence and running, Bella put up a barrier of her own instead. Ariel started panicking. She'd already accepted that this might be the end of the line for her. But it didn't have to be for her students. Even so, Bella wasn't into the idea of ditching her professor in the middle of battle, when she still had some gas left in the tank. Ariel brought up the promise they made before this mission. They all agreed that if something went wrong, survival must be prioritized. Varian's magic is clearly unnatural, All Ariel can do is buy time with her, quickly degrading defensive spells. While arguing with her student, that defensive spell finally broke apart. She felt the rebound of her spell breaking, and Bella quickly picked up the slack. Her translucent barrier matched Gluttony Flame's power. Impressively, Bella analyzed Varian's attack and figured that it's not that strong by itself. It just needs a slightly different kind of defense. Magic to counteract it. Seeing his flame stop in its tracks, Varian was on the verge of collapsing. The counter-magic theory for this spell is known only to a select few. So how could a mere student possibly figure it out? Bella nonchalantly replied that someone special had recently taught her a new theory. With it, every spell had become much easier to decipher. From the brink of crashing out, Varian completely lost his mind. He believed someone from his inner circle betrayed him and demanded to know the traitor's name. Teasing him with the most innocent expression, Bella kept her mentor's identity a secret. The man who opened up the world of magic to her is a mere student from the swordsmanship course. He patiently relayed some crazy ideas about magical theory, and with Bella's innate genius, piecing all the information together came naturally. Varian is a victim of successful rage baiting. Look at this man's veins, bro. They're about to pop. Has he been baited so hard that he'd pull out a suspicious bloody crystal to enhance his killing move? Crushing the bloody crystal in his hand, the human souls trapped within rushed out to fuel the gluttony flame even more. At this point, the fire looked more like a sentient beast than an inanimate spell. Varian might be committing crimes against magic and humanity, but his spell looks cool as hell. Even so, Bella estimates that her barrier can hold for a bit longer. She can theoretically extend this standoff infinitely, but her mana reserves won't last long. At her best, she can probably squeeze out one more minute. With her hands full on defense, Ariel would have to pick up the slack on offense. Using her divine eye, the red-headed professor locked in, seeing the flow of magic clearly. She saw a spot where the flames were particularly thin. If she can project mana outside the barrier, Ariel might be able to break through. She conjured charged strings of mana to freely flow through Bella's ironclad barrier. From her position to Varian's, Ariel had a clear path to a kill shot. Sadly, her intricate mana threads were just too feeble to break through. The gluttony flames, they slowly fizzled out until they were utterly snuffed out. Varian merely scoffed at the pathetic counterattack. As Gray recalled, Professor, Ariel's offensive magic was among the weakest of all the staff members. Her true specialty lay elsewhere, flame properties. Her inherently weak offensive power must have been devoured as well. They desperately needed to wrap this up quickly. Bella was starting to feel completely gassed out. Her stance was faltering, her grip quivering. The barrier could collapse any second now. This was precisely why Ariel had urged her students to run to safety earlier, with all other options utterly exhausted. It was time for the main event. Gray to shoulder the burden himself. Bella couldn't fathom how he'd inflict damage when a storm of powerful magic raged between his sword and Varian. Gray's response was essentially, "Nah, I'd win." Professor Ariel, sensing his plan, warned Gray against using his mysterious power. Using it again too soon could render his healing arm unrecoverable, or even worse, it could kill him. Nevertheless, dying alone was better than all three dying, wasn't it? Besides, they were worrying about nothing. The MC swiftly cleaved through the gluttony flame, flashing a deadly red light on the other side for Varian to witness. The last thing the crazy professor saw was Gray's unpredictably perfect slash, mixed with splashes of his own blood. His brain was still reeling, trying to comprehend what the fuck had just happened, while his head was neatly severed from his body. Just like that, Professor Varian Bradley was rightfully executed for his litany of crimes. His executioner? The man who would change the course of history. Gray Lee, who just smoothly cleaved off that villain's head, unaware her teammate was built like that. Bella Albright was absolutely stunned. Silence permeated the entire area until Varian's head and body violently hit the floor, staining the ground with his vile blood. This was Professor Ariel's first time witnessing the true power of the technique, the one that had originally piqued her curiosity, and it absolutely shattered all her expectations. She knew it would be a powerful attack, of course, but the sheer damage and lethality it unleashed was utterly staggering for freshmen. Suddenly, bits and pieces of the ceiling began raining down from above with a vengeance. Gray had gone a little overboard with the power output, severely damaging the structure of the spooky laboratory. As the entire building slowly began to collapse, the batty professor then stepped in to comfort her students. Without even lifting a single finger, she instantly suspended the falling debris right before it could hit the floor. She sighed in relief, praising Gray's monstrous attack. Glancing aside, Ariel asked for an immediate status check on Gray's body. Rapidly losing his grip strength, he dropped his sword. His dominant hand shivered in dull agony. It had gone numb from withstanding the raw backlash. Nevertheless, the damage wasn't as severe as he expected. After a few moments, he picked his sword back up and felt fine moving. Ariel attributed this welcome change to the results of his hardcore training. If he were still the same village kid who lacked fundamentals, he would have undoubtedly fainted for days and woken up to absolute noodle arms. Now, it only leaves him with some lingering pain. That's quite a massive improvement. Heathcote worked him to the bone, but the training is truly showing its fruits. Ariel's divine eye was glued to her student. She's trying to make sure they don't overlook any lingering damages. While she's grateful for how Gray performed in such a clutch time, she also feels sorry for being so utterly powerless. She was supposed to protect her pupils, but ended up relying on Gray instead. At the end of the day, Gray assured her that no one was to blame. Besides, he was the one who insisted on this mission, to stop Varian in the first place. Professor Ariel, however, emphatically lectured him about the consequences of using such an unknown power. She advised restricting its usage for a while. By her estimation, abusing this overpowered technique without knowing the full extent of its effects could cause irreversible damage. Gray felt the weight of concern behind her advice and promised to observe caution. After snapping out of her stunned silence, Bella timidly asked Gray if what he just showed was some kind of unknown magic. She didn't sense any ether at all. Being a mage, this oddity was breaking her reality. Actually, try to explain how such a high power output was possible. With magic was just impossible at this point in time. To save Gray from the hassle of explaining himself, Professor Ariel asserted that probing further into this matter was forbidden. She didn't want Bella to mention a word about what she saw here either. Bella was just asking out of curiosity, but this was a gravely serious matter. Although it would be against her will, Professor Ariel wouldn't hesitate to erase Bella's memories if it meant protecting Gray's secret vadiel. Realizing how serious she was, Bella proposed the formation of a magic contract for everyone's peace of mind. Ariel took care of the paperwork, magically summoning the arcane binding agreement. Bella signed the magic paper without hesitation. With Varian Bradley out of the picture, the trio was free to plan their next move. Though Gray wanted to investigate the various inhumane experiments as soon as possible, he believed that helping the human lab rats should come first. From the looks of it, every single one of them had been knocked out by sleep magic. They should not be in any immediate danger, but taking them to the Academy's medical facilities was a smart move, just to be safe. For what Ariel lacked in combat power, she made up for it with her array of utility spells. The inhumane prison lit up with a golden hue, as each prisoner was encased in a protective capsule. This protective membrane, this should keep them safe from most external harm. With the prisoners now safe and shielded, the trio can investigate deeper inside. Now that they can roam more freely, Ariel found herself once again surprised by the sheer scale of this criminal operation. Everywhere, traces and evidence of illegal experiments are scattered out in the open as far as the eye can see. Almost all of them involved human sacrifice to produce powerful magical catalysts. Alongside these were cruel setups, exploring the horrifying possibility of enhancing human magical abilities and capacity. Despite all these grotesque trials, Ariel found no signs related to the liquidator. Gray is working off the future site that this is the exact location where tens of thousands of people perished, linked to the liquidator's emergence. He knows this lab has to be more than a mere magic catalyst factory. Then a crucial detail suddenly came to mind. He recalled incident reports detailing how the majority of casualties resulted from miasma that welled up from the ground. If that's the case, something far more sinister must be lurking underneath this place. Curious and unsettled, Gray suggested they explore more vertically to find any possible hidden passages. With a cursory glance, Professor Ariel's divine eye didn't pick up any signs of that sort. But upon closer inspection, she picked up on something truly out of place. Near Varian's blood-soaked corpse, squatting on top of the oddity, Ariel pushed more ether into her divine eye, peering through all the illusions. It was infinitesimally faint, but she could sense traces of short distance. Teleportation magic on the floor. Perhaps they are on the brink of discovering a space only accessible to high-level magic. Based on the faint traces, she estimated the teleportation distance to be around 300 meters, going down. Thankfully, she's well-versed in the art of short distance teleportation herself. With a single snap of a finger, they should be able to override the concealment. Suddenly, a massive gate, made of pure magic and ether, surfaced from the ground. If they hit nothing, the other side of this gate should lead to nothing but earth and dirt. Ariel is banking on the off chance they find something, anything. The trio fearlessly stepped through the gate, but none of them could have expected what was waiting on the other side. 300 meters below the illegal prison lab was a city made of tightly packed structures. Who would have thought there'd be a massive area under such an inconspicuous place? Being particularly sensitive to magic, Bella pointed at one particular building. She could feel a tremendous ether output coming from it. Situated in the middle of the bizarre white city, a modest-sized dome, clear from nearby obstructions, stood tall. Focusing her divine eye on the dome, Professor Ariel picked up a sign of not just ether, but also a completely different kind of power leaking out. It was far greater than anything she had ever seen. Gray had a feeling that they had finally found what they were looking for. Dripping out of the dome were residues of the liquidator's power. Bracing themselves, the trio walked up the stairs leading to the dome. When they entered the structure, they found a door adorned with an ominous insignia and a platform, surrounded by vials filled with purple goop. The foreign power was definitely emanating from the door, encircled by the vials. Professor Ariel investigated the door's surface and extended her senses. Unfortunately, there were no signs of the liquidator's presence. Meanwhile, Bella was a nervous wreck, unsure whether they should even be messing with this cultish display. Ariel assured her that the door itself was safe. It didn't hold any power. If anything, it was just a benign symbol for the ritual. The thing they should be careful about is the magic rigs. At the tip of the 8-pointed star, she confidently tapped into that forbidden power. Professor Ariel spurred the formation's activation. Gray panicked for a moment, realizing one wrong move, and they might accidentally summon the liquidator, or something even worse. Ella voted to just shut this thing down before they messed up and put themselves in danger. Ariel, however, was unbothered. She just implored her students to stay put. Her prediction told her that this setup wouldn't actually summon a world-ending threat. Once the power from the rig filled the door, it started showing spatial cracks all over its surface. Gray and Bella wanted to pull their professor out of the formation, but ultimately chose to trust her judgment. The magic rigs glowed even brighter, making the spatial cracks bigger. A few moments later, the mechanism attached to the rigs slowed down the ether infusion. Just as Ariel expected, the formation wasn't meant to summon the liquidator. It was built to punch a tiny gap towards a different place of existence. Once the hole was big enough, it funneled the leaking power, turning it into pure crystal. At the core of this crystallization was a seed, most likely made of countless human sacrifices. According to her estimation, the pre-existing essence in the room was made up of about 10 souls. The molding process might have taken even more sacrifices than that. Exponentially, the majority of the drugged-up prisoners they saw upstairs must have been slated to be raw materials. For this twisted process, curious and disturbed, Bella asked why Varian and his cohort would go so far, just to gather an alternative power source. What were they planning to do with it? Well, they already saw the power augmented by human souls. That black flame Varian used in the fight was most likely a product of this setup. The crystal Varian held in his hand is basically a finished product. That catalyst can be used outside of just offensive spells. If they manage to mass produce these terrifying crystals, they could practically power anything needed for their nefarious plans. After getting a glimpse of the formation's true purpose, the cracks on the door slowly disappeared. At this point in time, Varian likely wasn't trying to call the liquidator. Whether he didn't try or simply couldn't is still unknown. Punching a tiny hole to a different dimension already pushed the space-opening magic rigs to their limit. Maybe Varian and his fellow sickos haven't managed to unlock their full potential yet. Nevertheless, the apparatus must be insanely valuable. A high-output spatial warp magic with such precision is bound to be worth an ungodly amount of wealth. Ariel estimated that making just one of the 8 magic rigs would cost an entire nation's budget. Only one organization in the world has that kind of clout and cash. Bella immediately thought of the Discar Empire, but Professor Ariel was thinking of a different group. The Discar Empire might be the world's biggest country, but it probably doesn't have the magical resources to build these rigs. There's only one organization whose magical research dwarfs even the empires. The one and only World Union Academy. That's right. The very same glorious institute they all belong to. Professor Ariel has been around the block for a number of years. He knows for sure that no other research body can support a project of this scale and budget. The World Union Academy, which was supposed to defend the world from threats, is dabbling in some freaky territory. Ariel was 100% certain that all the puzzle pieces pointed to their supposedly stellar academy. Still, that doesn't mean the whole academy is privy to this villainy. Most of the institute must have been just as clueless as they were before stumbling into this dome. Before the timeline reset, Gray saw how the academy's top forces fought, with their lives on the line, right there on the front lines. Even beyond the valiant subjugation squads, most students and professors continued protecting civilians right up until the very end. After witnessing that future firsthand, Gray refuses to believe the academy is purely evil. Ariel concurred with his assessment. She surmised that most of the academy acts for humanity's sake and would condemn Varian's illegal activities. However, the academy is massive, housing countless talented researchers from across the globe. They have access to top-tier facilities and resources. Hardly anyone in the world can truly grasp the full picture. Whoever was involved with Varian must have serious backing and influence. The illegal lab and the magic rigs couldn't have been arranged with just a professor's authority alone. That being said, they can't fully trust the academy. Ariel has been observing the intricacies of this prestigious institute from the inside for decades. She learned long ago that it's not an organization to be blindly trusted. Most of the people inside must genuinely believe they're doing what's best for the masses. Hell, even the ones behind this deplorable crime against humanity probably deluded themselves into thinking they're acting for the greater good. The truth is buried deep in the dark, and they've barely scratched the surface. Unfortunately, finding the mastermind would be practically impossible. At the moment, Ariel swept the area, and found no communication devices inside the dome. Not even the maker's magic residue was left in the rigs. They were in pristine condition. The cover-up was as thorough as it could be. Suddenly, the whole formation self-destructed. A series of deliberately placed explosives went off, in unison, destroying the dome from the inside. Ariel remained unbothered as she calmly assessed the evidence-erasing mechanisms. Considering the whole place didn't just explode, the instant Varian died, this whole setup was clearly designed to lure any snoopers in and take them out in one fell swoop. Bella urged the professor to stop theorizing and just get them out of there instead. Once again, Ariel proved that someone of her caliber wouldn't fall for such cheap tricks. She might be a little useless in a direct combat, but she's peerless when it comes to pure survival. As chunks of the dome's ceiling began to fall, Ariel conjured a glowing golden magic circle. She strongly advised her pupils to stay inside. Her spell, encompassing the magic rigs with pinpoint precision, she covered everything and everyone who needed protection. When the targets were locked, she pulled the trigger and teleported them out of harm's way. Professor Gray, Bella, the magic rigs, and the unconscious prisoners reappeared right outside Varian's sinister laboratory. Although some had suffered permanent damage, every surviving human lab rat made it out alive. Bella could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Even Gray was on edge. That last bit was way too close for comfort. Given that she had to move more cargo than expected, Ariel's teleportation spell was slowed down, but it was all worth it for the magic rigs alone. Once these valuable pieces of contraband are revealed, the Academy won't be able to ignore them anymore. The very next day, Ariel brought all the necessary information to her boss, the World Union Academy's headmaster. Oradrome Alexandro extended his gratitude for the trio's swift and decisive action. The survivors are currently being treated in the Academy's medical wing, and Varian's illegal experiments have been verified and dealt with. As for the magic rigs, that matter is a little more complicated. After a thorough verification process, each one was evaluated, equal to a nation's annual budget. 8 of those things would cost an ungodly amount to produce. Absolutely no way Varian could amass that much firepower alone. Then the headmaster straight up confessed the rigs were stolen. These priceless magic artifacts were hijacked while being transported when it happened. A staggering 78 transport agents were brutally wiped out. That many casualties is absolutely no joke, but for some unknown reason, it was kept entirely under wraps. Come to think of it, Ariel vaguely recalled an incident that perfectly matched the description from 15 years ago. The stolen cargo back then had been these very valuable engines. Subsequent investigations had indicated the culprit behind the massacre, and theft was none other than the blood drinker. Headmaster Oradrome Alexandro presumed everyone was already familiar with the name. It's, after all, the world's biggest crime organization. They are parasites that simply cannot be killed. They always manage to reform, no matter how many times they're seemingly crushed. Bella had made it her sole business to learn everything there was to know about this ruthless syndicate because they were the ones who brutally murdered her parents. The blood dringer's terrifying ability to resurface, no matter how many times they're seemingly exterminated, makes them an unkillable, persistent scourge. No one knows where they truly hide or who's really in charge. Some even say over 70% of all crime-related deaths can be traced directly back to them. It's always one way or another. It wouldn't be unreasonable to assume, then, that some of their key assets have already deeply infiltrated the Academy itself, and there's absolutely no way to identify them. Even if there was a way, the Academy would never act on it. Hearing this utter absurdity, straight from the headmaster's own mouth, infuriated Gray, while Ariel simply resigned, that the Academy operated on a creed that openly allowed situations like this. Anyone with any talent is welcomed with open arms, no matter their race, bloodline, gender, or affiliation, as long as they could blossom into something truly outstanding. Their criminal inclinations simply don't matter. Ella fiercely protested that criminals should be dealt with, not nurtured. Headmaster Alexandro couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, the higher-ups simply don't share that vision. He might be the headmaster in name, but he's entirely resigned to the fact that he's nothing more than an underling. In the grand scheme of things, sure, he's the official face of the academy on paper, but the authority he actually wields is borderline laughable. If Gray and Bella truly want to know who's truly pulling the strings in this place, then they'd better grind hard and grow stronger fast. The more power and potential they prove they possess, the deeper they'll be allowed into the academies, exclusive circles of power, and the more secrets will be uncovered. Alejandro can't drop names directly, but he heavily hinted that one upperclassman student wields enough influence to shape the academy's entire direction. This kid even had a hand in the wild policy of accepting talented criminals. To put it simply, if Gray can get stronger than that wildly influential upperclassman, he could fundamentally change how things are run in the academy itself. In this place, strength is everything. With a clear goal now in mind, both of the Divine Eye students felt the fire of motivation ignite in their hearts. Holding his tongue for now, the headmaster had one lingering question in his mind. He knows that when it comes to raw combat, Ariel couldn't possibly stand a chance against Varian at all. That means that one of these two youngsters overcame the gigantic chasm of power between a student and a professor. Ariel's divine eye is sharper than ever this year. Alexandro is eager to see what kind of monster the special program will ultimately produce. After the intense meeting with the headmaster, Gray headed out into a long hallway, deep in thought. Looking at the arm that houses his unknown power, he deeply pondered the importance of power if he wants to uncover the mystery surrounding the academy and ultimately change history. Getting stronger is absolutely imperative. He needs to shift his entire focus to getting stronger in any way possible. While he was contemplating how the future would unfold, someone rudely bumped right into him, snapped out his thoughts. He looked up to find the sole of a shoe, rapidly hurtling straight for his face. With no time to react or dodge, he instinctively threw his arms up to defend himself. Gray was sent flying back a good few feet. That was one seriously impactful kick. He felt a sharp, throbbing pain in his arm after tanking that unexpected attack. The assailant clicked his tongue in annoyance. Admitting Gray was tougher than he expected. When confronted, the assailant seemed oddly offended. He had dark circles under his dead eyes and an emo haircut. He whined that Gray just walks around like he owns the whole damn place. Well, he's just a mere special admission reject. Sounds like our emo boy. Here is just another one of those entitled pricks who despises the special admission slots. This is the first time someone actually acted. Against Gray like this, though, Gray grabbed onto his blade, ready to throw down if needed. Now, emo boy wanted to go all the way too, but the so-called reject number 2 just showed up. He was talking about Professor Ariel. The cowardly emo boy quickly turned around and walked away before the professor could meddle. Once he was far enough away, Emo started muttering to himself and apologizing for not getting any closer to his target. He bit into his thumb in sheer frustration, gnawing until it bled profusely. Emo quietly swore that he would send that reject straight to the afterlife to accompany Professor Varian. When the time was right, when Professor Ariel caught up, she immediately asked what had just happened. Gray snitched that some random punk just kicked him out of nowhere for simply walking around the academy's halls. Since no weapons were involved and no serious injuries were incurred, she couldn't really do much, officially speaking. Even so, she gave Gray the green light to chase that bitch and punch the lights out of that prick. Technically, she really can't be giving out permissions like that, but she could simply choose to look the other way, cooking up some flimsy excuse about her vision suddenly failing. Gray, however, isn't looking to stir up any trouble, so he opted to simply let it go. The notoriously mischievous professor seemed a little let down. Since they were already on the topic of discrimination, she couldn't help but ask Gray what it's truly like, being part of her Divine Eye special program. Gray confessed that snide remarks and outright rude comments are pretty much par for the course. But he added, this was the first time anyone had actually dared to get physical with him. Hearing the harsh reality her students faced, Ariel profusely apologized for her shortcomings, admitting her own lack of authority. Gray quickly reminded her that he wouldn't even be admitted here at all if it hadn't been for her direct intervention. Besides, he's totally confident that Bella and the others will soon prove that the program was absolutely not a mistake. After all, he knows just how incredible her eye is for spotting raw talent. Every single one of her hand-picked students went on to become renowned heroes, achieving greatness on their own merits. Gray's words brought her comfort. Ariel was genuinely pleased to hear that he had such faith in her abilities. Nevertheless, she implored him to really step up. Out of everyone in the Divine group, she confessed she's expecting the absolute most from Gray. Amy White, Leek Muller, and Jacob Bloomfield, like the special admits before them, all have the potential to become top tier. But Gray? He's made her believe someone could actually surpass humanity itself. Being compared to future heroes made him a bit uncomfortable. But Ariel's unwavering confidence in his talent was undeniably reassuring. The mastermind behind Varian's heinous crimes is still out there, actively plotting to summon the Liquidator. Those heroes he admired so much couldn't even hold a candle to that otherworldly being. The sole reason he came back to the past is to find a way to rewrite history. The fate of this entire world rests squarely in his hands. After tangling with dangerous criminal organizations and facing war crimes, it's finally time to get back to regularly scheduled classes. Gray's still a student. After all, today's swordsmanship class, it's all about live combat practice. The professor's already paired up all the students, according to the list posted on the board. This practical training is no joke. Gray mentally braced himself. If he messes this up, everyone will have another reason to trash talk Divine Eye. He won't let that happen. At the very least, he needs to keep up with the average student. Unfortunately, his assigned matchup might make that tricky. He was paired with none other than the freshman representative, Leon Hart. He is the knockoff. Lloyd Forger, who is the current top student of the swordsmanship course. The professor insisted the pairings were decided by matching up students of similar skill levels, so there's no need to hold back. Everyone must treat this practical like a real fight. Gray quietly cursed the professor for making his life utterly hellish today. As far as he knows, Leon absolutely despises Divine Eye students. That dude is probably itching to give him a bloody beating after their last encounter in magic class. Speaking of the devil, Leon grabbed him by the shoulder, stunning Gray. Unbeknownst to him, our blondie here is absolutely stoked to spar with his new idol. He's trained harder than all his peers, and he's desperate to show Lord Gray what his sword can do. Seeing that brightly intoxicated smile on his face, Gray didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or just be scared. He interpreted this look as the look of a man who absolutely loved the fact that he could beat up a classmate legally after everyone found their partner. The professor gave the go signal to start right away. Soon, the sounds of steel clashing filled the Colosseum. Leon Hart didn't waste a second, charging forward instantly. Speeding like a bullet, Gray raised his blade hurriedly, barely blocking the energetic strike. Leon easily overpowered his block, sending him skidding back with brute force. Our blondie relentlessly closed the gap, not letting Gray get an inch of a break. Gray tried to retaliate, but he was easily thwarted by Leon's perfect form. Based on their brief, metallic exchange, Leon genuinely praised Gray's strength. It's a wonder how he didn't make it in through regular admission. Now that they've gotten an initial read on each other, both combatants are hitting the gas, seriously upping the ante. Gray thought he'd be instantly crushed, but he's actually holding his own. He's absolutely outclassed in raw power. But technique-wise, Leon's polite swordsmanship is the perfect definition of textbook style, perfected to a terrifying degree. even with his extensive combat experience. From his past life and his master's hardcore training, he is barely keeping up. Leon Hart AP is one of those homegrown monsters, a terrifying blend of talent and diligence. As their sparring reached its climax, virtually everyone in the field stopped their duels to watch these two. They were all surprised that the divine eye student was actually keeping pace with their number one. Leon, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. He could do this all day if given permission. On the other hand, Gray was struggling, his stamina quickly fading. If it wasn't for Professor Heathcote's hardcore training, he would have collapsed a few clashes ago. On the contrary, Leon looked wholly unaffected. The guy wasn't even breathing hard yet. If this turns into a battle of attrition, Gray would be forced to take the L. Luckily, the professor gave them explicit instructions to treat this practical like a real fight. That means they wouldn't be limited to textbook techniques. When Leon tried to hack him in half, Gray ducked out of the way in an unusual stance. He was almost face down, rear up in there. Using his palm, he pivoted his body from the floor. Not expecting such unorthodox movements, Leon was caught off guard. Instead of fighting a losing battle with swords, Gray resorted to using his feet to limit Blondie's mobility. Gray literally swept that fraud off his feet while Blondie was suspended in the air. Gray used his sword to capitalize. Gazing into his eyes, Leon finally grasped what the professor meant. When he declared this bout a true life or death battle. Even from such a disadvantaged position, he refused to lose. Ultimately, the blades of both fighters ended up mere inches from each other's throats. Gray stood in an upright position, while Leon eked out a quick counter from the ground. Gray offered a helping hand, calling the duel a draw. Leon gladly accepted the olive branch, but refused the draw decision. He knew that at the very last second, all he could do was instinctively swing his sword. On the other hand, Gray could have clearly pierced his tip into Leon's heart, if he had wished so. Since this was still a mock battle, Gray had to force himself to shift his target. Even with all the protective spells in place, he didn't feel comfortable pointing his sword at a sparring partner's heart. With a smile, Leon Hart graciously accepted the loss. Thanks to this exchange, he gleaned valuable insights on the crucial difference between real combat and mere fencing practice. Gray felt a bit ashamed for pulling a trick move in a swordsmanship class, but Leon asserted that anything goes in real combat. There's no such thing as cheating when lives are on the line. With that being said, he politely requested another round. Gray was rightfully hesitant to accept such a proposal. He'd only won the first bout because of his pivot surprise factor. Now that Leon knew how crafty he could be, his chances of stumbling into a win had gotten way slimmer. Even without mentioning the gap in technique, their stamina difference was just too wide. Before Gray could politely decline the enthusiastic proposal, some random NPC inserted himself into the discussion. This NPC, over here, asserted that a sword class was meant for a showdown. In technique, not trickery. In truth, he was just salty that the special admit loser was paired up with this year's top student. Gray was already getting annoyed by this dumbass. Thankfully, all that yapping was interrupted. Leon immediately stepped in to champion Gray's right to fight, calling Gray his sole equal, then told the NPC to back off. The professor, not one to miss a beat, piled on and reiterated that all pairings were determined by matching students of similar overall strength. Conveniently, Gray is the only one capable of facing Leon. If anyone still wants to complain, challenges are welcome. If the NPC can somehow beat Gray, the professor would then allow a showdown with Leon. The NPC's face practically popped a vein. He then loudly bragged that he was among the select few who actually beat the examiner. To earn entry into this prestigious institute, he certainly wouldn't be grouped with frauds who just barely made the cut, or those who outright failed. Leon scoffed, utterly unimpressed by the NPC's simplistic mindset. It felt like he was listening and looking at his old Leon Hart persona. He figured this would be a perfect chance for Gray to truly showcase his power, a power that deserves full recognition. Still, he was absolutely furious that some nameless NPC dared to interrupt his precious time with Lord Gray. The NPC, however, glanced behind his opponent and saw Leon practically gnashing his teeth in pure rage for the unforgivable crime of stealing time. He could have spent touching tips with Gray. It took every single cell in Leon's body to prevent him from committing actual murder. Poor NPC boy had no idea that he was only alive because they were inside the campus, since the entitled NPC was so salty about his unorthodox fighting styles. Gray agreed to solely rely on his swordsmanship skills. He had no clue how strong the challenger actually was, but anyone who made it into this academy via stellar entrance exam results should be quite confident indeed. Judging by his build alone, he could tell the guy had superior stamina and strength compared to him. His master's crude and brutal training couldn't possibly overcome years of dedicated practice, proper nourishment, and conditioning, right? First of all, Gray, he made sure there were no hidden catches. For this challenge match, it's just a fun, no-stakes match. The professor nonchalantly assured them this showdown wouldn't even count, but encouraged the fighters to go all out. With the air cleared and rules set, Gray and the NPC boy raised their blades when the signal to begin dropped. The NPC boy charged forward like a total maniac. He's already convinced that today is the day he'll finally rise in prominence by putting this special admit in his rightful place. To gauge the NPC's strength, Gray openly received the initial strike with a well-timed block. Much to his surprise, the dude who loved talking shit actually has noodles for arms. While NPC boy was reeling in confusion, Gray was already plotting out his next move to deal with the light-hitting normie in front of him, trying to recover from the humiliation. The NPC boy got up, acting as if nothing had happened, and restarted his attacks. Gray wondered if the dude was holding back, or if he was just that bad. His mind was so preoccupied by questions that he forgot to control the depth of the next cut he dished out. Gray easily drew blood by scarring the NPC's life forever with one of the combatants. Desperately crawling on the floor, the professor motioned to announce the conclusion of today's final match. Gray immediately felt bad about overestimating his opponent and causing some serious damage. He was aiming for a simple disarm into a dodge, but the NPC guy was dumber than Gray anticipated. Like a good boy, the NPC just stood there and took that hit until he bled, with tears of humiliation flowing down his face. The NPC requested a rematch right away. He strongly insisted that he just slipped up and the first win was a mere fluke. The professor felt so bad for the guy that he allowed more rounds until he finally got the message. Once again, the NPC boy was sent soaring, blade and feet lifted off the ground. A few minutes later, Gray hesitated, struggling to raise his sword, moved by pity for his poor, unfortunate victim. The NPC boy had been utterly trounced, dragged around repeatedly, so much so that he looked completely unrecognizable from the arrogant challenger he had been just moments earlier, left with a face that only a mother could love. Both the professor and students awkwardly averted their gazes. The swordsmanship professor himself, in fact, had to request a few of his students to literally drag the poor dumbass to the infirmary. With that last bit of drama finally out of the way, the freshman year representatives were officially crowned, and as expected, it was Gray and Leon. Their repeated beatdowns from earlier prevented any and all objections from arising. Unfamiliar with how the academy truly works, Gray asked how he had been selected as some kind of representative. And Leon, ever enthusiastic, gladly explained that the top first years must face off against the second year, championed in the much-awaited inter-year battle. In recent history, however, the first years have an abysmal record of 0 wins and 35 losses. It was a literal 0% win rate. A 35-year losing streak. The professor has a feeling that this year will be different, though. 3.5 decades of absolute, relentless pub stomping is just too crazy. It truly signifies the immense power gap between freshmen and second years. A single year of survival in this academy is a huge factor. Indeed, at this point, losing to the upperclassmen had become a grim normality. If anything, it's to be totally expected. If a freshman could even put up a decent fight, that could already be considered an impressive feat. A win, on the other hand, would go down in the Academy's history as an absolute miracle. Being chosen as one of the two representatives, therefore, should definitely be taken as an honor. Both Leon and Gray must carry that heavy responsibility on their shoulders, since there are practically no expectations of winning. The inter-year battle doesn't sound as serious as Gray initially thought it would be. Still, this is a golden opportunity to prove that a divine eye special student can actually hang with the big dogs in the coming days. He completely immersed himself in intense training. Meanwhile, under the headmaster's watchful eye, the Academy's faculty convened a critical meeting. They broached the controversial topic of Professor Budra's proposal. Driven by pure, unadulterated greed, Professor Budra from the Magic Department audaciously floated the idea of expelling the divine eye. Their special student, Amy White, Ariel immediately shot down this unbelievable proposal. She was the one responsible for her students' well-being, and some random pigs shouldn't have a say. Still, Budra persisted, yapping about how Amy White had ultimately failed the third-year advancement exam. He found it utterly unfair that she was allowed to stay, in spite of her undeniable failure. Every other student who failed had been immediately expelled. It's simply not fair for those who followed the proper due process. Ariel, however, calmly reiterated what she'd already explained. Countless times, Amy is indeed progressing towards becoming a world-class fighter. She had suffered intense backlash and was temporarily unable to display her full power. If healthy, she would have easily passed that silly exam with absolute flying colors. Budra flat out refused to believe Ariel's narrative. A few other professors also swiftly refuted her statement. Anyone could paint the picture of some hidden prodigy, but without solid evidence backing up the claim. It's all just fantasy, Ariel. Ariel firmly asserted that Amy is bound to gain full control of her power any day now. Maybe even tomorrow. But if they push her too soon, that crucial window might close forever. The coalition of Magic Department professors continued pressing her, framing their stance, as if they wanted to protect the Academy's integrity by upholding its supposedly high standards. Ariel had to sharply remind these stubborn people that the Academy exists solely to nurture exceptional talents. Dismissing someone gifted just because they don't neatly fit into a system completely defeats that noble purpose. With a particularly smug smile, Budra insisted that the special picks were in a steady decline, labeling the current batch as a bunch of absolute failures. Amy White, Bella Albright, and Jacob Bloomfield, all of these so-called prodigies, come with some significant form of baggage. He implied the Divine Eye program was losing its touch. Perhaps it's time to abolish such an outdated program. Ariel was accustomed to being ganged up on by these men, but they had never pushed her this far before. Budra continued, stating that the Academy's Founders Council had established the program, so if they voted and half the faculty agreed, the decision should be respected. Given the dismal results from the current Divine Eye batch, many professors were on board with this idea. They had all heard about Bella's improvement, but they dismissed it as a minor advancement, citing her still questionable mana capacity. And admittedly, old Divine Eye students were legendary talents. The recent batch paled in comparison. Based on the sly looks being exchanged around the round table, it seemed this meeting was a coordinated effort to oust Professor Ariel. There were more vocal, anti-Divine Eye voices than she anticipated. At this rate, they might gain enough votes to gut her program, with that ugly-ass Budra at the helm. They believed that. They were championing a change in an outdated system. In truth, they just couldn't stomach the idea that a woman was a better judge of talent than they were. Ariel wanted so badly to defend herself, an advocate for her students, but anything she said now could be twisted against her case. The loud majority already disliked her heavily. Still, many professors cared about whether a program benefited the academy or not. If she wanted to sway them to her side, she needed to be as inoffensive as possible. Budra basked in the glory of silencing Ariel and continued to heap insults upon her. They acknowledged her past achievements and suggested she retire before she ruined her legacy any further. In the same breath, some of the hostile professors even suggested that she should just start her own school if she couldn't bear to let go of her precious students. Hearing such a blatantly disrespectful dig made Budra and his buddies belly laugh. Ariel endured the humiliation. She's desperate to buy her students more time. She genuinely believes all they need is time and proper support before they can truly blossom into something special. If she could just prevent their expulsion before that happens, it would be a huge victory. While discussing the Divine Eye students, one of the old-timers brought up Gray's name. It's been announced that the kid is now being hailed as a promising freshman in the swordsmanship class. Hearing that a Divine Eye reject was picked for the inter-year battle made Budra perk up. He confidently proposed everyone decide the Divine Eye program's future based on the results of this year's inter-year battle. Ariel subtly glanced at Heathcote, but the stalwart trainer shook his head in disapproval. She argued that Gray isn't suited for mock battles. He's meant to be a lethal weapon, only to be deployed in a kill-or-be-killed scenario. An old geezer slammed his fist on the round table and accused Ariel of just making more excuses. He believes that skills not shown in training won't be useful in real combat either, losing all leverage in this negotiation. She tried to explain that Gray's abilities simply cannot be judged by common sense. Before the meeting could get even more heated, Headmaster Alexandro demanded silence before wrapping up today's discussion. Curious as to what Gray is truly capable of, the headmaster agreed that every professor should come and watch the inter-year battle before properly picking a side. Ariel was mortified, but the meeting had already been adjourned. Every other professor left the round table with glee, leaving Ariel utterly listless in her seat. Heathcote was visibly worried for his friend. Ariel trembled as she silently apologized to her students. She's seen just how strong Gray can be if unleashed at full power. But the boy still needs time to develop a solid foundation right now. All she could do now was place her hopes and dreams on the back of her youngest prodigy. It's all up to Gray to protect the Divine Eye program's future. The day of the inter-year battle has arrived. The entire academy gathered at the Grand Coliseum, ready for their festive tradition. As the competitors were introduced, the poster boy noble swordsman, freshman top student Leon Hardalpius, earned thunderous cheers from the crowd. In the opposing corner stood Lionel Hartman, the Academy's top-performing second-year student. When Gray Lee was introduced as the first-year challenger, the reception was markedly different compared to the Golden Boys. As for the second-year challenger, Gray recognized the edgy emo teen who tried to jump him in the hallways. Not too long ago, Diable Radardle. Who would have thought he'd get the chance to get his lick back on the big stage? The host rattled off more formalities and platitudes, while a thick air of tension wafted from one side of the viewing deck. Various professors from different departments had gathered to witness this year's inter-year battle. Leading the pack was Professor Budra, with his smug smirk and seemingly extra-strong shirt buttons. Leon noted the inordinate number of professors who had come to observe the showdown. Senior Lunel also found it strange. Last year, only 3 fencing professors bothered to show up. Looking around the entire row, now filled with esteemed professors, Leon finally understood what was happening. He reckoned everyone must have carved out time from their busy schedules out of sheer curiosity about Gray. Lionel found Leon's enthusiasm odd. The guy never behaved like this when they were younger. Budra confessed that they'd really shown out to watch Gray and to witness the final battle of the Divine Eye. Special admits that revelation caused a buzz amongst the students who just wanted to watch some bloody fights. blissfully unaware of what was discussed behind closed doors. Gray, oblivious, asked for clarification. Budra was amused to hear the boy hadn't been informed of the crucial role he was about to play in academy politics. With absolute confidence, he dropped the bombshell. The Divine Eye class is being abolished. Crushed, deleted, utterly wiped from existence. Gray's eyes immediately shot to Professor Ariel, seeking confirmation. But her reaction was all the answer he needed. She knew if she revealed the truth to Gray, that boy would push himself to dangerous, even fatal, lengths. He might even risk everything and unleash that destructive power once more. Without proper rest or training, overstraining his body could easily kill him. Instead of moping, Ariel chose to put on a brave front and bravely cheered on her boy. She insisted Budra was just playing mind games, trying to psych him out. Her words might have sounded composed and confident, but her trembling hand painted a starkly different picture. Gray chose to respect his professor's unspoken wish to shield him from the pressure. But that doesn't mean he won't go absolutely sicko mode today. Budra pouted when his provocations were so easily dismissed, but he was still eager to watch some fresh clownery from the freshman. He fully expected the young man to lose so miserably that the other professors would finally get off the fence and finally realize that Ariel's Divine Eye is nothing more than a cheap party trick. These days, since that pig upstairs couldn't stop yapping, Gray had had enough and spoke up. He couldn't let blatant insults against his mentor just slide. He didn't care if Budra badmouthed him. But talking down on Professor Ariel's judgment, that was a mortal sin he absolutely couldn't forgive. Hearing Gray stand up for her like that gave Ariel a powerful kick in the guts. Budra scoffed, tossing out some utterly generic trash talk. He couldn't even bother to think of any creative insults. Gray vowed that by the end of the day, he would prove Budra's dumbass self utterly wrong. Fatty loved dishing out insults, but he sure couldn't take them himself. The referee then stepped onto the stage and asked the participants to split up into their respective corners. Ariel appreciated Gray's maturity, but she was completely in the dark about his plan. If he were to fight the top student, Luinol, his practical swordsmanship style might have given him an unexpected edge. As fate would have it, though, he's up against a truly terrible opponent. The infamous Redardal is quite the oddball. Rumor has it Professor Varian Bradley surgically rewired this kid's brain, boosting his reflexes to inhuman levels, effectively turning him into a living weapon. This is the worst possible matchup for Gray's tricky ambush tactics. He might stand a chance if he chooses to unleash that double-edged technique, but Ariel's conscience wouldn't be able to handle it. If anything bad happens to the kid, before the event, she had assured him that he didn't need to worry about her. During the program, Gray responded with a confidently affirmative smile. First up, the top student match. Both representatives were called forward. The arena has been warded with protective magic to prevent fatal wounds. Triggering an opponent's safeguard counts as a win, so both participants could move, as if they were in real combat. The inter-year battle's top student match is officially underway. Trying to control the tempo from the start, Leon rushed headfirst with a roar. Luna was pleased to see the aggression. He wanted to test the waters first. As soon as he entered a comfortable range, Leon unleashed a flurry of slashes. As his barrage slowed down, Luinol seized the perfect chance for a counter. A heavy attack, aiming to decapitate, in one fell swoop, whistled through the air, completely missing Leon's vitals. He surprisingly used his hand as a pivot point, blatantly copying Gray's winning move against him. A few days ago, instead of sticking with his rigid and predictable technique, Leon chose to evolve and incorporate more trick plays. Unfortunately, he can't fight like Lord Gray yet. He lacks the timing and confidence necessary to pull off something like this. Luinol managed to knock his head back, dampening the damage from a kick. He admitted that Leon is way stronger than he was in his first year, but it's about time to make. Leon realized how big a difference a single year at this academy can make a huge difference. He quickly intensified his assault. With a triumphant smile plastered across his face, Luinol aggressively charged his junior. leaving no room for his opponent to breathe or even regain stable footing. Leon quickly found himself on the ropes. Trapped at the arena's edge, with nowhere left to run, Lionel pounced like a relentless predator. His sword was intercepted by powerful protective magic, just before its sharp blade could slice Leon's neck as easily as a hot knife through butter. But, as expected, the victor of the first match was the second-year top student, Louis Nell Hartman. Graceful in defeat, Leon thanked his senior for an engaging match. Without wasting another moment, the referee announced the next challenger match. As Leon passed his idol, he offered his sincerest good luck. Gray had already boasted quite a bit. It would be mortifying if he couldn't back it up. In his past, he'd battled more vicious monsters than he could count, even before turning back time. Compared to the harrowing terror of the Liquidator and the horrors of the apocalypse, facing this edgy opposition feels completely winnable. Meanwhile, in the other corner, Diablo ominously dragged his blade along the ground as he whispered dark promises to the deceased, Professor Varian Bradley. He yearned to send the madman's killer to hell for a bloody reunion. So without further ado, the selection match for the challengers was now underway. Gray's stance was solid and unwavering. Diablo, on the other hand, was utterly unorthodox. As they sized each other up, the Colosseum fell completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. The moment the go signal was given, Gray immediately swung his sword, forcing his eccentric opponent onto the back foot. Much to his surprise, his attack, bearing its full force and weight, seemed utterly ineffective. Diablo's casual swing drove him back. That casual swing, however, was so heavy and forceful that it left his dominant arm trembling. Professor Ariel had already briefed him on Diebel's oddities. Before the fight, he already knew about the boosted reflexes, but it felt like Varian had also buffed Emo's arm strength, with such an immense difference in raw power. Petty tricks became entirely useless. Gray's mind immediately leaped to the most extreme step he could take. However, Professor Ariel had already warned him not to use that power no matter what happened. The worst-case scenario was death. You can't come back from that. She emphasized that, even though the tournament was important, it simply wasn't worth sacrificing his life over. Besides, the arena's defensive barrier wouldn't hold against such sharpness. Using the technique might end up killing the opponent and some spectators along its path. To protect Ariel and the Divine Eye program, Gray would gladly take on some risks, but he couldn't possibly kill a fellow student in a school event, no matter how awful that student might be. Diebel turned the tide, taking on the assailant role, forcing Gray to defend. Each swing packed a serious punch, but his movements were weirdly simple and robotic. With his physical stats and enhanced reflexes, people should be able to easily overwhelm Gray without many problems. He wasn't lacking in technique either. The only explanation was that he was holding back. The weirdo was planning something. Look at those eyes. That's not the gaze of a sane person. For a brief moment, Gray felt a sinking, morbid feeling in his gut. He stumbled backward, barely dodging a clean vertical slash. Out of balance, with both his feet in the air, Gray's eyes constricted as the metallic tip inched closer to his vitals. Knowing the limits of his speed, he dropped all hopes of dodging and focused on blocking. Much to his surprise, his half-assed attempt to prevent being stabbed in the face worked wonders. He definitely should have died that time, yet he survived somehow. Diebel likely weakened his attack at the last second, purposely. The fight's intensity sent her stress levels through the roof. Professor Ariel sprang to her feet. She activated her Divine Eye to get a more detailed look at the arena. But instead, she found something deeply disturbing. Where Diebel's heart should be lay a material emanating malevolent ether. Her concentration shattered as Professor Boudra's utterly useless drivel forcefully demanded her attention. His buddies chimed in, saying his second year challenger was practically just playing with his food, despite being able to end the duel at any moment. He's merely dragging things out. Grayley already has his hands full, struggling just to block haphazard attacks. Surely this is proof enough that Divine Eye geniuses are nothing but frauds. At this rate, the entire Divine Eye program will continue to be humiliated. Budra and his cronies were laughing merrily amongst themselves, barely paying attention to the fight itself. Ariel finally stepped forward, demanding the fight be stopped right away. Budra dismissed her outburst as yet another excuse to back out from having to prove their confidence. There's no need to worry about the well-being of the participants. The magic department is supremely confident in their powerful protection spell. Any attack that would cause fatal injury is automatically blocked. For years now, the Academy has used this tech so students can fight seriously without fear. Ariel already knew all that, so she's being accused of trying to back out of a lost cause before it's too late. Just as she was yelling about her students' safety, a burst of sinister intent erupted inside the arena. Diable finally stopped messing around and fully tapped into the malicious heart beating in his chest. Ariel was no stranger to fearsome sights, but the unhinged look on that young man's face made her shiver to her very core. Focusing the dark energy into his blade, Diable unleashed a single, devastating slash that effortlessly cleaving through everything in its path. The attack surged onward, completely unobstructed, and when the dust finally settled, the entire arena was practically bisected. Even the formidable protection magic, which Buddha's department boasted about, had been reduced to a flimsy curtain, effortlessly pierced, punctured, and sliced. Witnessing such a terrifying technique finally snapped Buddha back to reality. No one had anticipated the barrier's destruction, except for Ariel, who quickly conjured some corporeal ropes, while cursing Varian for being a pain in her ass, even from beyond the grave. Ariel frantically tried to mend the gaping hole in the formation, but the remaining barrier's reflective property was too strong, rendering her binding magic completely useless. Thinking quickly on her feet, she screamed at the magic department losers to disable the entire barrier immediately. The tournament is officially canceled. This isn't a mere swordsmanship showdown anymore. The mages responsible for manning the barrier were utterly paralyzed by mortified silence, since she couldn't rely on these stooges to do their jobs. Ariel yelled at Gray to just run for his life. Unbeknownst to her, however, running had been taken out of his options a while ago. If he even dared to turn his back on the monstrous opponent before him, death would come instantly. The spectators were blinded by the intense, bright lights and overwhelmed by the thick sense of raw power wafting through the air. Heathcote quietly estimated that Ariel's binding spell would likely take another 30 seconds to reach the fighters. It was still too early, but they had no other choice. Heathcote gave Gray the subtle signal to go for the ultimate technique they'd been studying. The strict drill sergeant yelled at him, "Think of your body as the sword itself. Swinging a sword is for noobs. Moving body and weapon in perfect unison is where it's at." No matter how simple the concept sounded, complete integration was far easier said than done. But if Heathcote believed that he was ready, then he was probably somewhat ready. Besides, it wasn't like he had any other choice. Channeling the very essence of a single blade, Gray locked his focus onto the weapon in his hand. Diable then unleashed another wild, devastating attack that tore through the floor. The dark wind blade was forged from pure, unadulterated chaos itself. The attack slammed into the protective barrier, unleashing a massive explosion that obscured all vision. But Gray was nowhere to be seen. Yet he was completely unharmed by Diable's assault. Supremacy, tapping into something slumbering deep inside. Gray vanished, then instantly reappeared behind his opponent in the merest blink of an eye. For the very first time since the fight began, Diable finally felt truly threatened. Gray watched his edgy rival's head slowly turn, and it felt like a scene unfolding in slow motion. No, it wasn't that Diable had slowed down. Gray was the one who'd become exponentially faster.